Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players, uncover their stories, and discover what makes them tick. If you love guitar, music, and the backstory of people's lives, stick around. You're in the right place. If you're a business owner and you want to increase your cash flow, or if you're a label or artist and you want to promote new music, then listen up. For information about advertising on Everyone Loves Guitar, including information on geographically targeted ads, go to everyonelovesguitar.com/advertise. That's everyonelovesguitar.com/advertise. The Be Fulfilled Journal helps you be more honest with yourself and with others and be more open to handling things you've avoided dealing with for years. It's a 12-week online and journal program that helps you identify and eliminate things you do that are causing you stress and live in more gratitude and joy. It was actually developed by a long-term friend of mine who got sober in 2008, and he's put together a great deal just for my listeners. You get the 300-page hardcover journal and access to the 12-week video program online, plus free shipping, plus membership in a private Facebook support group with others going through the program, plus a 5-day mini course showing you how to let go of stuff that's draining your energy, plus a 30-day 100% money-back guarantee. To start your journey and get all the bonuses, go to BeFulfilledJournal.com/ELG. That's BeFulfilledJournal.com/ELG. Hey, everybody, this is Craig Garber. Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar. And we have the one and only Todd Kerns with us today. And I have to give a couple of shout outs for hooking us up is Walter Eno and Arik Frank out of Seattle. Thanks, guys. So before I get started, I just want to say Todd looks like he's about, honestly, like 24 years old. And I was trying to scrap the interview and just find out his anti-aging secrets that he wouldn't give them to me. The ransom was too high, so we'll have to do the interview instead. But one day, Todd. Anyway, Todd is actually from Canada. Do not hold that against him. He's a great guy. He's an incredibly talented bass player, guitarist, songwriter, producer, and he's got a fucking amazing voice. He's currently out on tour as the bassist and vocalist for Guns N' Roses legend Slash and their solo band Slash featuring Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators, as well as being the frontman of legendary Canadian group The Age of Electric. He also has a successful solo career as a singer, songwriter, producer, and he's continually recording, touring, and releasing new music, and we'll talk about some of that today. He's had the opportunity to share the stage with some of rock's biggest names, including Slash, of course, Lemmy, Alice Cooper, Rick Nielsen, Duff McKagan, Adam Levine, Fergie, Bill Murray. That's so funny. Like, he's one of those guys, you know, he's not a rock star, but he can go in there, rock's biggest name, like golfing's greatest golfers, you know, it just like that guy would fit in any category. Sammy Hagar, Michael Monroe, and Sylvain Sylvain. I hadn't heard that name in a while. He's a member of Canada's BC Entertainment Hall of Fame. He's got a star on Granville Street Star Walk in Vancouver, alongside such other Canadian luminaries as Bryan Adams, Sarah McLachlan, and Michael Bublé. Amongst his many side projects, he's played Kiss Cruise 7 in 2017, 8 in 2018, and lo and behold, he'll be on 9 in 2019 with ex-Kiss member Bruce Kulick, who I interviewed a long time ago, if you want to check that out. Todd appears on lead vocalist, rhythm guitarist alongside Slash, featuring Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators drummer Brent Fitz. Another Canadian, you said, right?
Yes, sir.
Todd and Brent also created the Canadian tribute act Toke. Did I pronounce that right?
Took. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Canadian, eh?
Took, eh? With Shania Twain, Kelly Clarkson guitarist Corey Churko. He's from Nashville, right?
He's in LA, but he's Canadian, yeah.
Oh, I thought he was a Nashville cat. That's weird. They were recording, performing classic Canadian cover songs by groups like Loverboy, April Wine, this cool band, Rush, and more. Releasing an album called Giver.
Yeah.
Giver. Releasing an album called Giver in 2008 with a second coming fall of 2019. I could say two things. One, congratulations, you're doing a lot of shit. Number two, thank God no one pays me to get these done correctly because I would be earning zero. Thanks for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, my pleasure. It's so funny when you hear all that. You're like, God damn, that sounds like a lot.
It is,
like,
man.
people always say that to me. They're like, "Man, you're so busy all the time." And I'm like, "Well, I managed to watch an entire season of like, whatever." And my kid came to visit this weekend, and she's like, "I've never seen the Twilight Zone." I go, "What?"
Oh yeah,
little sister. It
yeah.
was like, off we went down this Twilight Zone rabbit hole, and I do think I make good use of my time, but I also kind of balance it with a lot of of constructive, useless time. But I think that's part of the fun is the I get a lot out of chilling, television, rock and roll. It's the same as when I was like a kid. Watch TV, you go to movies, you listen to music. And that's basically what my life is now. It just happens to be, what I do for a living.
So you're good with balancing. Like you sound like you're really well balanced, actually. That's why you're so young looking. Honestly, this guy doesn't have a fucking wrinkle. I mean, it's almost like it's like
also that I only do interviews over the computer with a crazy Joan Collins filter going on.
It's working. I need one. Where can I get it? Oh man. So you're pretty good about being balanced.
Well, I honestly, as I was saying to you before we started about like, I'm not a real good going to the gym kind of guy and all that kind of stuff. And I think that, there's always that sort of balancing act of like, I can slide into, one season of this into another season of that very easily because life on the road is such that it's just kind of slamming busy all the time. But it is sort of, as my friend always says, he says, I'll play the music part for free. It's the travel and all that you got to pay me.
Right.
And I think that's, it's kind of part of the fun of it is the travel, but it's also the part that kicks your ass. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And, but I love it too, because I love, like in the Slash situation, we actually all really get along. Brent Fitz and Frank Sidoris, our guitar player, and we're like inseparable when we're on the road together. And it's just, I really enjoy my time with them. When I come home, we tend to get together on a regular basis as well. So
that's cool.
Yeah, the actual travel aspect can be a real blast. But things like jet lag is real. But you do find yourself sort of in this constant state of like, hurry up and wait. And that's part of what it is, So even though it's kind of exhausting, you really are only working, the hardest part of your day is the best part of your day. You get on stage for a couple hours and it's like, it's everything you've worked your entire life for. So it's really hard to be kind of like, to complain about that. It would be like unforgivable to be complaining.
Kind of. Yeah.
So it's a good life and a good job to have and everything I ever wanted, so it's like, sure, there's, the hard parts being away from your loved ones and everybody knows that, but there's guys who drive truck or have to go out in a boat to go fishing or whatever they do for months at a time and they're away from their families too. So it's part of just that kind of lifestyle.
I think anytime you're self-employed, there's going to be sacrifices you got to make, and that's what it is, period. You guys are all entrepreneurs. I don't think most players look at themselves like that. But for me, as a business guy looking in, you're all owning your own self-employed businesses.
Absolutely.
And every business, everybody I know that owns a business sacrifices. It's just the way it is. It's like the price to pay to not have to listen to somebody else tell you what to do, sort of.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's fucking I mean, depending on your personality, it's like very well, you were saying before, who wants to work?
Well, I mean, there's a part of me that, like I've had a lot of friends who are way more talented than I am. And I'm not saying that to try and be humble about it. It's true. When I was a kid, there were guys that I looked up to and I was like, I hope someday I'm as good as that guy. And that guy got married, had kids, and became an accountant or something. You know what I mean? Like he just checked out. And I was like, so when I was young, I just could never understand it. Like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Because I was the guy who was like, whenever you put a band together, especially when you were younger, you really started to realize who the Vikings were and who weren't, or who the Pirates were, because you would say, we're going to get in a van and we're not even sure how far it can drive. And we're going to drive, 8 hours in that direction and play a show. And it's going to cost us money out of our pocket. And we're going to sleep on someone's floor if we sleep at all. And then we're going to drive back And there were a number of guys, they would all drop off because there'd be tons of guys going, what are you talking about? I'm not doing that. Or, I want to I got to work in the morning, or, or they'd already kind of somehow kind of found themselves in that world where they had car payments or rent or whatever, even as young men. And when I was younger, I never understood it. It's kind of like, I was like, what are you talking about, man? We get to go play and people are going to I was going to say people are going to love us. That was never the case. In reality, you would go and play, and to complete ambivalence.
But you had that you were passion driven, and they weren't.
Yeah, I don't understand, anybody who wouldn't be excited by that. But at the same time, I understood. I never looked at my friends who dropped off and thought, "What a loser! Like, was going to have a wife and kids and have a normal life now?" I certainly don't think I had that streak in me. Like, I never had that as my passion per se, even though having a family and being in a relationship and all that kind of stuff, and having some functional, ability to kind of like, have a life, obviously was more and more important as I got older. But as a young man, it was just like playing music. When I finally got out of high school, me and my friends, literally packed up a van and started just hitting it hard. And we kind of like always managed to scrounge together about an average of about $100 a week I would survive on. And I never once remember complaining or even thinking it sucked. I was just like, this is the best in the entire, like, how does it get better than this? It's like, I get to play music. We travel around. It's a different place every night. And to me, I felt like I was living the dream at 17, 18 years old. From there, you kind of step up into better and better situations. But to me, it felt like I was doing what I wanted to do, even though there was no future. My family was tripping. Like, I'm sure they were, very concerned that how long can you do this before you have to at some point amalgamate into normal society and get loans and credit cards. And because I would have girlfriends and they'd be like, we should get a new living room set. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? I'm never here. I just never, and it was I was really a terrible boyfriend, and really, because I was so committed to piracy, just being like riding around and playing music. And it wasn't, I don't think I was meaning to be cruel or selfish or anything like that. It was just sort of like, this is what I want to do. And that really hasn't changed all these years later. It's just that now I can actually, manage a real life, if you want to call it a real life. It sort of meshes with my fantasy life,
Yeah, but you paid your dues, man. It's like, what's the difference between a surgeon who charges $5,000 for the heart operation and one who charges $15,000? Well, the guy who's charged $15,000 probably done a lot more operations, man.
That's true. Yeah. I read a quote yesterday where somebody said something about, some woman asking Picasso to sketch her, and he just scribbles something down in 30 seconds. He goes, that'll be $10,000. And she goes, it only took you 30 seconds. And he said, it's taken me a lifetime.
Right. Bingo. Absolutely.
And it's sort of one of those things where, I'm not of the mindset, like, I'm not doing this unless it's $10,000. That's the funny thing about playing music, is it's kind of like, there are things I'll do for free. Absolutely. But there's also things that, you have to be paid for because, you're a professional. It's what you do, and I think that's to be expected of, like you say, surgeons or artists or anybody. So
one thing that you do that's really cool is I've on social media that I've been seeing, you're like really good about going out of your way to interact with your fans.
Well, it's funny because I've always been weirded out by the term fan.
Sorry, yeah, you're a listener.
No, I'm not. To me, it's always been kind of like, I've always felt
customers.
Well, yeah, I've always felt pretty blue collar about it. Like I perform a duty here. Like I put on my apron and I go to work.
Right.
and again, that might sound falsely humble or whatever, but it's not the case. To me, it's always kind of like, I am such a fan of music. Like I trip, like when you talk about like Lemmy or Rick Nielsen or Alice Cooper, every time those guys have stepped on stage with me, I'm immediately like, just immediately turn into like Chris Farley on that. Remember that time when you were in Altitude? Like, want to ask a gazillion embarrassing questions, but it's just taken us, it's just become so much what I do that's, standing on stage with any of those people becomes pretty normal in its own way. But I still never lose that sort of like, damn, like that's Joe Perry or that's, whatever. You're kind of like, so to me, it's like, I feel the same way when someone's talking to me. I feel like there's still so much I want to accomplish in this life and in this business that I never really feel like, I'm very aware of the fact that a lot of people know me as a supporting member of Slash's solo band, and he deserves all the accolades. He's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He's done all these great things. He's also one of the most humble and together people I know. So there's a lot you learn from watching a guy like that, kind of, how he reacts in a world where it's infinitely more
easier for him to be in, lose his grounding.
Totally.
Yeah.
You kind of look around at those, I don't know, any of the people who have, real, Prince or Michael Jackson, and they kind of remove themselves entirely from.
Oh, those guys are removed from everything, man. I think.
Yeah. Where Slash has kind of managed to be a fairly regular dude in his own way, even though, I know that he is so recognizable that on a day-to-day basis, going to get a Slurpee, an ordeal, what I mean? Kind of, So for me, it's like when I try to interact with people, it's more like, first of all, it's completely overwhelming. So it's kind of like I'm a grown-ass man with a lot of things going on. So when someone asks a question on Twitter and you don't get to it, it's kind of like, well, that's just because life is insanely fast.
Wait a minute. Do people actually ask questions and expect you to get back to? I mean, like, not just you. Who the fuck has time for that? Come on.
Well, that's kind of how I feel about it. If I tweeted a question to, Robert Downey Jr., hey, the new Avengers movie looks rad. I respect that.
Or Bill Gates. Hey, Bill, I noticed in your book on page 97, I disagree with that. I mean, like,
but the reality is, I look at, I don't consider myself Bill Gates or Robert Downey Jr. So to me, it's kind of like when someone says, I guess it depends on the nature of the question, because sometimes it's kind of like, especially when it comes to guitar nerd stuff or rock and roll nerd stuff or nerd stuff generally, where you're kind of like, hey man, check out my new ES335. And like, damn dude, that's sweet, and then you kind of get on with your day. But, I think interacting is just normal, I suppose. And I think it's also maybe a certain amount of being Canadian. It's funny because I remember being a kid. And I was from a small town in Saskatchewan, Canada. And it's probably very much like watching old films about, or not old films, but like places like Kansas or something like that. I don't know. I always think of those kind of old movies. But I remember we put this band together, The Age of Electric, that went on to be a very successful band in Canada. There was me and my brother and then two other brothers from the big city. So we went back to this small town of mine because we thought, well, we can rehearse, we can rent a place. It'll be next to nothing because it's cheap in this town. So the whole, we did all that. And we walked down the street, like, let's go down to the cafe and get something to eat or whatever. And you'd have like that kind of like that old farmer guy walk by and go, morning. And and my friends, these guys from the band from the city would be like, do you know that guy? And I'd go, no, not really. Like because it's a small town, but it's like that kind of small town, like, how are you today? As they walk by, oh, I'm good. How are you? And it's sort of like, it's just a very small town. I'm sure that happens probably everywhere in small towns all over the world. And I think that Twitter, so in some ways kind of has that effect too, where someone says, hey, how are you? And you go, I'm good. How are you? If you are cognizant enough to be aware that someone has said that in this giant, swarm of bee buzzing noises that are coming from your phone. But I just try to be, it's like when someone walks up to you on the street and they say, if they're nice enough to say something complimentary about what you do, hey man, it's like, it's nice that happens. I'm always aware that, trust me, when I talk about all those years of going up and playing and making $100 and, we played I've played every terrible place in the world. And my brothers and I could sit around telling stories of oh, that time that guy threw that thing at us, you know, or that beer bottle caught me in the leg, and then my brother jumped off stage, and there's a big brawl, you know. And that was like totally normal, like, you know. And so playing to an audience that not only doesn't care, but actually actively wants to hurt you, you know, to go from that to somebody actually is paying attention, to somebody liking your music, and somebody actually being, you know, somewhat devoted or really into what you do. That transition is a very welcome one, you know, because I watch a lot of, I can't imagine what it must have been like for somebody to be 17 to 23 years old and just like, boom, everybody loves what you do. The end. You know, you just kind of ride off into the sunset. To me, it's like it was years of just hard fighting to kind of get anybody to give a shit. You know,
I've talked to a lot of guys that had that, and I shouldn't say a lot. I've talked to a good handful, several handfuls of guys out of the like 500 players I've interviewed that have had that, and every one of them has said openly, you know, hey, I was a dick. It was too, you know, I had all this money. I mean, I just interviewed Steve Stevens yesterday. He was super cool guy, really nice. And he said, you know, that's one of my regrets. I wish you know, and I've tried to make amends to that to other musicians that I was kind of a dick to. He goes, you know, I was a kid. Billy Idol hits the shit. Like he goes, I went from, you know, he's from New York City, and he went to, MHX, Mike Matthews pedals.
Okay.
What's the company name?
Totally to forget, but yeah, I know what you're talking.
Brain fart. Anyway, so and he went from going to trying out to be one of their demo guys, and then he's on the road with Billy Idol all over the world, and they call him and they go, "Hey man, we just want to let you know you won the contest." But that's how, and he's like, hey, I'd love to, I thank you so much, but like I'm out on the road with Billy Idol. But that's how quickly it happened, and all of a sudden his shit blew up, and he said money was coming in, and I was just kind of I had no time to process, you know, you don't have any coping skills, and it happens, you know. And
that's what I mean, we see it in like any number of people who don't have a chance to be 23 years old and struggle and how am I going to rent this month? You just immediately go into like, there's no problems. You know, as soon as you take away the financial burden of like, how am I going to do this? But that's all the stuff that makes you strong, you know, and it makes you it makes you realize that I can do this, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's part of if you take that away, eventually, I mean, again, it's probably be a good problem to have. It's probably the most interesting conversation to imagine. You would know your real self very quickly if you were just handed the world. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just kind of like you would become your true self. And sometimes that might be the worst part of yourself. You know what I mean? I think that's where you kind of like, when you're handed everything, which is never really the case. Guys like Steve is an immense talent. I mean, Steve's
incredible.
One of my all-time favorite guitar players, and stylistically very unique, very much his own guy.
We talked about that. I asked him about that. Yeah.
And like the flamenco stuff, forget about it. I mean, he's like so next level that way. And I mean, when you say like, oh, it came so easy, it's like he happened to be a very special individual. I mean, he worked very hard to become who he was. He happened to have something very special to put himself in that position to become successful. But you know, that said, it's like, you know, everybody struggles. It's just when that struggle kind of hits the wall of like, you know, quicker than it does for other people.
Yeah. No, I totally get. That's why I was totally off topic. But when it came to raising kids, I was really cognizant of that, and I never was that dad who thinged his kid to death. I always made him have skin in the game because I didn't want to raise like emotional quadriplegics. That what you just said, it makes you who you are. I didn't want to deprive them of that sense of satisfaction. They fucking hated me, you know, but
I know what you mean.
You know, that was really important to me. I didn't want them, you know.
Well, the important thing, I mean, like I said, like when I was a kid and I was barely making any money, and I was like, you know, I really didn't, my whole life was NFA, no fixed address, just hotels. And then when we would take time off, you'd be, you know, staying at a girlfriend's place because you don't really have a home, you know what I mean? But I never really thought I was missing anything. You know what I mean? It was kind of like, this life is not for everybody. You know, it really is not for everybody.
No, life is not for the weak, man.
it's like when I look around, I remember saying to, having friends who were like, dude, that sounds like so much fun. That is so awesome. But I knew, given the chance, there's no way they would just give up what they had going on. Okay, well, here's my guitar. Take this. Just go do that.
I'll meet you in the van tonight. You have to push it out of the snow.
And I've done that.
Right.
But I just knew that it's like everybody gets into their thing, what they do in their life, and Wednesday nights they go bowling, and then I got poker on Friday. And I never really was able to have that because, I had it. It just happened to be with these same group of gypsies running around the country. And that's kind of the, it's not for everybody. It really isn't. And I think that, we as musicians often get a bad rap. Like it's kind of like, we're just out there pillaging. And I think actually a lot of the musician guys I know are some of the most, arty, sensitive kind of cats, who actually really
very much, yeah,
really wanted to, just wanted to be able to express themselves and do something that they felt good about, and I think that that's the hard part is, I've often, when you kind of kick down that fourth wall and, when the world is like just, Monday through Sunday and then it starts again, and you get to kind of do that same thing every day and whatever it is, which I'm actually kind of fascinated by because I've lived in that world a few times where I've had a regular job and a regular life. It just never stayed because there was always some sort of music opportunity that always pulled me away from it. And, too much to my luck. But I think sometimes it's like, it's hard once you've been on the other side of it and you kind of lived in this sort of like Wizard of Oz kind of life to go back to Kansas and be like a regular person. It's kind of like, oh, right. It's kind of like you have to acclimate entirely back to reality. And that's why so many people have a hard time once they kind of come out the other side of being a musician or an actor or whatever the hell it is. They have a hard time kind of plugging back into just being a regular person. And sometimes it doesn't take,
Yeah.
For every story of somebody who decided like they took their money and bought a chain of supermarkets and have a life out in Michigan somewhere, there's some guy still in Hollywood, who just got chewed up and spit out by the industry. But that's, just as much can be said about the business world as music or sports. A lot of guys live in a world of sports, they 19 years old, 20 years old, suddenly have themselves a massive contract and go off and have this and they can be just as living in a state of arrested development as anybody else because, since you're 19, 20 years old, everything seemed perfectly cool. I'm actually kind of thankful that I've had to, really kind of had to have a machete and just hack my way through the jungle.
No, that's like, so you get so many skills from that, man. Survival skills, coping skills, humility. I mean, I agree with you, man.
I wouldn't trade it. In a lot of, of course, looking back, there was times where if I'd done this or if I'd done that, things might have gone differently, but I never really spend a lot of time. I don't really spend a lot of time looking back in general, as like mostly life is about like, there's always some new mountain to climb.
Yeah. I agree with you, man.
We climb this one. Let's climb that one now.
Hey, question for you about your, who is Andrew Hoffman and what did he steal from you? So let me give you everybody the context. So Todd has an album called TKO, came out in 2016, which if you haven't listened to Todd's solo stuff, really check it out. He's super talented guy, man. Great writer, great voice. So he's got a song on this record TKO called "You Know What You Did," and there's like a lyric in there, and he seems like really pissed off at Andrew Hoffman. Who's Andrew Hoffman? What did he steal from you? Spill the beans.
It's funny because we were like my friend on that particular project, Reed. We would lock ourselves in a studio and we would write a song every day, and it literally would be like, which I think is an amazing practice for anybody, really. I mean, it was to kind of go into a studio, not with like we're writing a song today, like I have a riff or I have a lyric. It was kind of more like we would go in like with just a big hunk of marble and start just kind of chipping away at it till something started to kind of come together. You know what I mean?
That's really tough, man.
It's super tough. And honestly, there were days where we did this for like multiple times. The TKO project in general was all built like that. Every single song was written like that.
Is that a double? It's like how many 40 songs on it? It's a fucking massive record.
I don't think it's not like that big. No, it's more
pretty big.
It's a pretty big record, but when with multiple sessions, we would kind of come in and, like I say, we'd go in around 11 o'clock in the morning or noon. And there were plenty of days where it'd be 8 p.m. at night and we really hadn't found anything.
Look at you. You're so like normal. We went in at 11. Most guys, musicians, that's all. Yeah, we went in 11 p.m. and you're like having Starbucks. You're like very, very like,
it was like,
very normalized. Yeah. Yeah. We punched in 11 and then, after 7, we got overtime.
Yeah, no, it was not. It wasn't like we were like some sort of like Nashville songwriting kind of thing. It wasn't like that at all. It was like really some jackasses with guitars, just locking themselves in a room. And we brought along our long suffering drummer friend because it would just be like we would literally just jam until something would kind of start to materialize. And that's like really I say, it was tough, literally sometimes where we'd be like, 6 hours later and 7 hours later, and nothing had really materialized. And then all of a sudden there would be just this little thread that we'd start pulling on, and it would turn into something. So it was a great practice to get involved in.
That's what you're probably saying, like the first 5 days. This is great. I bet you weren't saying that the last 5 days.
Actually, well, this is also the thing too. Especially back then, I was really good at like having a notebook and just scribbling down ideas. Like sometimes you'd hear a turn of phrase and write it down, or you'd see that'd be a cool song title. So I was drawing upon that a lot when it would become time to like, okay, this will be the verse and this will be the, we kind of piece together something, and then it'd be like, hang on. And I would just sit there and I'd kind of look at my little book and start to kind of try and build something. Eventually when I'd kind of tap that out, then it really became like, okay, now we're really got to dig inside ourselves. And what you did, that song was 100% based on reality. The first verse says something about Arizona's in Ontario. The bouncers beat the band after the show, which is about some friends of mine who played in this place called Arizona's in Ontario, Canada. And I don't know what happened exactly, but after the show, they got into a big brawl with the security at the venue. And it was like super crazy and all that kind of stuff. So I basically just, all 3 verses were written in this kind of like, once I stumbled onto the term, what you did, I guess must have just kind of created this negativity, not negativity really, but this kind of like, fuck you.
Yeah.
First verse was about that. The second verse was about getting, I tried to check into a hotel once. I walk in with a guitar and the lady was like, absolutely not. And I was like, what? She like took one look at me with my long hair and a guitar and was like, no musicians. And I was like, what? And I'd never experienced this kind of like, this thing in my life. I was like, at the time I was like, a reasonably successful, musician, So it was kind of like, but what? And so I was like,
where was this?
In Calgary, Canada.
So you can't do that shit in the States. 'Cause like you'll have a lawyer the next fucking morning right on your office doorstep and everybody knows it.
Yeah, I suppose maybe that I might have kind of threatened some of that, but I think I was just so kind of like, what? Like kind of freaked out by it that I was like, okay. So then the second verse was about that. And then the third verse was about playing a show where this show up in northern British Columbia in Canada that some guy had begged me to do. I was like, dude, I'm really kind of busy with a bunch of other things going on. And it was just, no, dude, it's going to be this, it's going to be that, it's going to be huge. And finally I kind of like, okay, fine. And after this total epic journey of finally getting up there, it turned out to be a total disaster, as everybody knew it would, because it's in some remote, crazy area. And then he refused, to pay us. And I was like, so it says something like, Andrew Hoffman, you small time fuck, you ripped me off. Where's my $500? It was like,
that's his real name.
I don't remember if that's his real name or if I just kind of stuck some sort of like.
That's funny, man. So that was real. I had a funny feeling it was real. I don't know why. And
that's why the nature of that project was such that, I was writing songs in that moment of like, well, I just kind of basically tapped into these 3 different things that had happened. The first one being my friends getting beat up by the bar staff, and the second one being, kicked out of a hotel just because I was a musician or I had a guitar, and then the third one being getting ripped off at a show, which is all the things that They suck at the time, but they're all the kind of things that, that it's part of being in this crazy life of
tuition.
And the funny thing about it is you're the first person to ask me that in I don't know how many years.
Really?
That no one's ever asked me, who is this guy and what did he do?
There you go, man. I'm
no idea whatever happened to that guy. I'm sure he's a normal person now and has a real life. He was the promoter, I believe.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you were so angry with him. I was just curious. That's why I wanted to know. Hey, talk about, if you could talk maybe some cool stories or how this came out working with some of these guys. Lemmy, let's start with the great Lemmy.
Well, Lemmy was involved. When I got involved with Slash in 2010, he was supporting, it was to support his first solo album, technically a solo album called Slash, where he had multiple different singers on it. Miles Kennedy was one of them. That's how Miles got involved in the long-term version of this band. Chris Cornell was on it. Kid Rock was on it. Fergie was on it.
That's wild.
So Lemmy was on it. And we were doing the Golden Gods Awards, which is a thing put on by Revolver magazine, the heavy metal magazine. And, it was funny because I was literally just kind of like, just started jamming with Slash, which was disorienting enough. You're kind of like, oh.
I got to ask you one Slash question. The only one. I'm reading Steve Lukather's book.
Oh, I've been meaning to read that too. Yeah.
It's a fast read, man. I'm amazed. Like there's nobody he doesn't know, like from Hollywood celebrities.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's like and he's not like name dropping. He's like actual knows them. He has stories with them and he was fucking mental with them. And it's just really funny. But does he still have Curtis? No,
and I know exactly who you're talking about. Yeah, Curtis was his like mountain lion or something.
Yeah, like a mountain, like a proper cougar or something.
Yeah, like a cougar, like some kind of crazy. He pointed at this scratch on his hand one day. He goes, "Yeah, I got this from Curtis." He told me this whole story about how fucking he had a fucking mountain lion or whatever, and he was like passed out and Curtis was digging around in some, just kind of like a Carl's Jr. bag or whatever that he'd kind of, and he kind of swatted at him like, knock it off. And then I guess the cat, swiped at him. And like, I know what a house cat does to my hand when he swipes at me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, damn, dude. So, he had a whole thing where he had a whole like a backyard kind of area set up with these kind of like, set up with, not tunnels, but like a kind of thing that was set up so the cat could go from the back door through this series of things into this kind of area for him. And I was like, damn, dude, who has the the energy and time for this? But he loves animals so much. Yeah. Like Slash is a huge animal supporter and stuff like that. But he doesn't really have any of those kind of things anymore. I don't think he even has any snakes anymore.
Yeah, he talked about that. That was minor compared to the Curtis thing. I wasn't going to ask her when I saw that mountain. I could just imagine like tonight, like, hey babe, we're getting a mountain lion this evening. I don't think that would go down well in my house, but that was the only Slash question I had. I was curious about that. Okay, so Lemmy was one of the singers, so So like within the first when I first started playing with Slash, it was literally like, I always tell the story. I showed up with with my favorite P bass, plugged it in. We played like Night Train, and then it was immediately like, okay, so we're doing Jay Leno next week. He had Jay doing the Tonight Show. I was like, whoa, what the hell's going on here? Like it immediately hit me, and I was like a really busy musician here in Vegas. Like I had like a whole life booked and like booked months in advance. Like I was like a highly busy cat, and then so I had a whole world to kind of juggle around there. But and Brent hooked you up with
Brent called.
Was a connection?
I was literally like it's probably a tired old story for anybody who knows me, but I was actually like looking at houses. It's like 2010, so the
dude, you're just like so domestic, man.
I know, right? Like, and that was the first time in my life. Like when I talk about all that, like sleeping on floors and all that kind of stuff, that was my life up until about 2010.
Hey, well, good for you, and I'm really happy it's not your life now.
At one point, I of course, I owned a condo in Vancouver before I came to Vegas and all that. But I just, I came to Vegas. I never really intended to move to Vegas. I just sort of came here because some friends had some stuff going on, and just found myself kind of falling into this kind of like, wow, I can just play music and be with my friends. And I still would travel back and forth. I was basically living in both places. And the housing market was such at the time that it was like, well, I got to put my money somewhere. And they're like giving houses away at the bottom.
Oh, that was right after the market crushed. So the prices were really low. Yeah.
So the house I'm currently sitting in, it was like, this is before Slash. So I was already looking at, I was doing well enough that I was looking for grown up decisions like buying a house. And then my father just happened to come down because he's a grown up, and, I'm going to look for a house. And he's like, okay, I'll come down. And I was literally sitting at a Chili's, oddly enough, after like looking at some houses with my dad and Brent Fitz. I don't know if he called or texted. I've always probably called, because I pick up the phone and I go, hey dude, what's going on? And I had only like a week before that, Fitz said something like, he sent me a text saying Slash's drummer is from Winnipeg. And I just laughed because that meant Brent Fitz got the gig with Slash.
Right.
And I was like, that's fucking awesome, dude. And Brent Fitz is from Winnipeg, Canada.
Right.
And so I go, that's fucking awesome. Good for you. Not thinking anything about like, can I be in the band? It was just sort of like, that's awesome. Good for you. And then a week later, he's calling me, and he basically, he was so like funny about it, because he was like, hey man, you want to come down and jam tomorrow? And I was like, yeah, sounds like fun. Like, and I'd been on stage playing in Vegas with everybody. Like we had everybody from George Lynch to Sylvain Sylvain from New York Dolls and Cheetah Chrome from the Dead Boys. All these guys would just get up on stage and we would jam. And I was the king of just kind of like, sure, let's play that, And so showing up and jamming with Slash was just totally like, yeah, of course. So I just went down, played. I seriously don't remember doing anything more than like Night Train, and I didn't go over anything. That's the funny thing about it. It was just kind of like the Appetite record is just in my DNA. It's just like normal for me.
Yeah.
And so I just showed up, played that, and then they started going, okay, now we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that. I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. It was like this huge Craig Ferguson's show. James Corden has it now. Like all these things. And one of these things was this Golden Gods Awards, where not only we're gonna do what we do. I think Andrew Stockdale from Wolfmother was coming out because we were supporting the single, which was By the Sword, which is the song that Andrew sang on Slash's solo album. So it was this weird kind of like hybrid of the band playing, but then like Andrew would sing his song, Miles would sing his songs, and Miles would sing, I think, Guns N' Roses songs as well. And then Lemmy was going to sing his song. And Lemmy was going to sing Dr. Alibi from that album. And then Dave Grohl was going to get up and play drums, and they were going to do Ace of Spades, which was bananas.
That's like, really cool.
Yeah, it was like, what? So wow. we basically did, we were rehearsing, and then like, ladies and gentlemen, here's Lemmy. Lemmy just walks in classic Lemmy form with his bros carrying like Jack Daniels and Coca-Cola. And he just comes in, and he's like fucking awesome. Like he's like, I'd seen Motorhead so many times at that point and been such a fan that it was like, wow, it was like totally crazy. And, he was just an amazing guy, and he was like that till the day he finally passed. But, where I would run into him later on and go, I'd be like, immediately Canadian, like, oh, hey, Lemmy, I'm Todd. I play with Slash. I'd kind of go through that thing because I'm never presumptuous. I'm just going over, hey, dude, and have to look at me like, who the fuck are you? But I remember I would go through this same preamble every time, like, hey, I'm Todd. I play. He would always look at me like, yeah, I know. He was kind of yeah, I know who you are. He was always amazing that way. Like he just, for as much that was going through his system at any given time, like he was always he never was out of control. He was never like slurring. He was never falling down. He was just keeping, a steady hang, and he was always super sharp and super kind and super cool. And, and he remained that way to the end. So we performed countless times with him. He would just randomly show up, South America, wherever, just get up, sing songs with us. And he was just amazing to the end.
If I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly, because I interviewed Frank, I think Brent got him in And it was a similar thing because I remember him saying, he was just a buddy of mine. We used to just hang out at Starbucks and talk we had good friendship. And then the same thing happened. He like called him or texted him and he goes, what?
That's why Brent Fitz is constantly bombarded with people calling him about.
He's like the Henry Kissinger of Slash's universe.
Well, and not only that, but Brent, if Brent likes you and he thinks that you got something going on, he's going to try and connect you with something because, because there's always, in this business, there's always somebody looking for something and what you do and your ability is only part of the game. You know what I mean? It's like,
oh, totally.
It's so much based on like who you know. And I know that sounds like a cliche of cliches, but it is true. And it's sort of like the first thing we do if, say, we're looking for a musician is go, who do we know? And you work sort of outwards from there. Like if I can't think of anybody, I ask my bro, who do you know? And then he asks, and we kind of go from there. It's rare that you put up your thing at Guitar Center, like looking for a guitar player. It's like it usually comes down to like, a connection, within 6 degrees of separation. And like Frank is an interesting story because Frank is so much younger than us.
Yeah.
That at the time, I remember being like, we were looking for guitar player, and we actually did do open auditions for that guitar player.
Yeah, he's super like he's an old soul. I mean, kind of. He's not his age. He doesn't act like he's really mature, man.
He's the oldest soul.
Yeah, I was so impressed with him, man.
And I think that's what Fitz kind of like immediately connected with is that Frank knew Fitz as playing drums with Alice Cooper, and him and his Frank's dad, Frank Sr., was a massive Alice Cooper fan, and so Frank didn't fall far from that tree. To this day, I think Frank would drop everything he's doing to play guitar for Alice Cooper, as most of us would. But at the time, I was kind of like, we were looking at guitar players, and some of the guys. There was a lot of great guys in there, and Fitz was like, he was talking about Frank, and I go, he's too young, bro. He's way younger than us. I go, he's fantastic, and he's a great guitar player, and he's an amazing dude, but I don't know if that's going to work. And now I can't imagine anybody but him. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like Frank is so perfectly the guy. But not only is he the guy, he's also so much more capable of so much. Like, I think that in a funny way, people always assume that the guy that's not Slash on that stage has an easier gig. Like, it's like, because Slash is such a gigantic personality and his guitar playing and everything else, that the other spot is somehow like there's some sort of cake, play some A chords and just, it's like,
that's a lot of pressure there, man.
Yeah. Frank's doing a lot. And there's a lot of like, him and Slash just kind of making sure that everything is working and complementary and sliding together, that it's a lot of work. And I think Frank is so much that guy. He's also so much more, there's so much more he's capable of that I think that, that's going to present itself as time goes on too, that Frank will eventually step out and become like, oh, I didn't know he could do that, because I know he can.
I agree with you 100%.
And I think I'm a huge supporter of him as a player and as a person, that I'm really excited to see where he goes from there. But I think it's a great opportunity to be able to play in this situation with him. But like you say, yeah, Fitz is a wealth of
he's like there's this guy everybody tells me about that everybody passed through in LA. I'm thinking his name is Barry Squire.
That's the guy. Yeah. Barry.
Right. Everybody has told me they've passed through, he's like, the hookup guy. And like everybody who has, Justin Derrick, everybody's worked with, gotten gigs through him. And that's what Brent sounds like the Vegas version of. He does
I think that it's also a case of like, you meet people and you go, I like this guy a lot. I like his playing. I would like to play with this guy, so when an opportunity presents itself where you're like looking for a guitar player or a bass player or whatever, you immediately think, well, I like that guy. Let's get that guy. And that's part of, I think he's sort of always kind of mentally Rolodexing everybody who comes along. Rolodex. There's an ancient reference for you.
Yeah, showing your age there. That's right. My kids wouldn't know my daughter certainly wouldn't know what a Rolodex is, man. Okay. how did you find? No, I'm going to ask you this: top 3 experiences you've had musically, which is a tough question.
Top 3, good Lord.
Yeah.
Well, I think the funniest thing is that I've always been pretty bad at categorizing those things because I always kind of feel like there's still more coming. You know what I mean? Like that. I still feel like that there's. And I just said this to my wife not that long ago. How I was kind of like, I still feel like that there's like still something more coming that's going to be like, like I just recently when we talked earlier about like when you mentioned earlier about getting that star in Vancouver on the street, like it's like on a sidewalk, like that my name is on a sidewalk on the street, and it's such a weird kind of like. When they brought it up, I was like, am I dying or something? It's an amazing honor and all that kind of stuff, but it's a weird kind of like, it makes you kind of stop and press pause and like look back at what you've done, where I've always been sort of like eye on the prize moving forward and always having a goal in mind. That it's kind of funny to start to look back and go top 3 things. It's like, wow, that's a real trip. I mean, they're probably bizarrely, not what people would expect kind of things, because I think, like standing on stage in Download, which is the old Castle Donington in England, those festivals where you look out and you see all those people. It's like one of those things where you kind of like, wow.
It's probably 100,000 people there or something.
I don't even know. I don't even know what the numbers are, but those European festivals are crazy. I would imagine Rock in Rio or something like that would probably be even crazier, but yeah. It's enough that it's like, people always say like, is it, like, doesn't it make you nervous playing from those people, that many people? And you kind of, I think it's so surreal. They're looking out at that mass of people. It becomes so surreal that it almost has the reverse effect, where it's kind of more like, this is fascinating.
Yeah. Well, if you're in a little club and everybody could see everyone's eyes, and you're like, shit, I cannot fuck up. But if you're on a stage, it's almost like, man, these guys are so far removed. I totally understand that, man. The pressure's just about you and the band having fun,
I'm one of those people though. It's like, I've never really been a stage fright person. I think I enjoy it so much. And in a lot of ways, I've said a million times where it's like, I'd rather be on stage than at a dinner party sometimes, because you kind of feel like out of your element. This is not what I do. It's like, trying to have to make small talk and not be embarrassing somehow.
I was just going to say, who would rather be at a dinner party? Good Lord. I'm not a musician. I'd certainly rather not be at a dinner party. Yeah. I'd rather be on stage than at a dinner party. God, no.
Any of those kind of things, And so to me, it's kind of like, the idea of standing on stage and playing music is like really normal to me. Like, it's like not normal, but it's like really like my happy place,
Yeah.
Anyway, so, and I play a lot of acoustic shows. I haven't in a minute, but I do them a lot where you're by yourself. And at first, those are the first time in a long time where I wouldn't call it stage fright, but it definitely gave you a sort of like a charge of like, you do not have loud drums and loud guitars to hide behind now. It's just you. So when your voice cracks or you fuck this up, it's you.
Yeah.
And when someone yells, "You suck," they're not talking about the band. They're talking about you. Which thankfully doesn't really happen. But, it's sort of like, so when I think about like playing a small club or playing 100,000 people, to me, it's like, bring it on. I love all that stuff. But when you talk about those, top 3 experiences, it'd be things like that kind of moment of playing in front of, in Download, I think specifically felt like, as a rock and roll fan growing up and seeing all those old Castle Donington kind of, from different magazines and different things as a kid, and then standing there on that stage and looking out and going like, yeah, I guess we've arrived to some degree. You know what I mean? I'm always very realistic about it. Like, I never feel like, check me out. It's kind of like, it never feels like, you just landed there without having paid the toll to get there.
Yeah, man. Well, it's funny. I asked, I think it was Phil Collin from Def Leppard. He said, something about a lesson or something that's most aware. And he goes, everything is temporary. He goes, I've come to learn that when you're riding high, he goes, you're going to get that phone call. Something's going to be wrong somewhere. Maybe it's business, work, health. He goes, and the same thing when you're in the shitter, he goes, you're going to get that phone call, that glimmer of hope that turns everything around. And it was, kind of true.
And that's true of life.
Yeah. Right.
And that's why I think I'm always so hyper aware of the fact that, whether you play music or you happen to be going to a construction site. It's sort of like, there's good, bad things happen to everybody all the time. And that's part of the game, and I think that sometimes, the trade-off of getting to success, there's times where I felt like, you really have to go through some crazy shit to get to those things to happen, to the point that sometimes it doesn't necessarily have that sort of hugely satisfying effect of like, yes, I am here, I have done it, I have made it. Because in reality, it's sort of like you paid an incredible amount of price. Yeah. It's kind of like, going to the gym and working really fucking hard to look a certain way.
Yeah.
Well, that's how you look like that. You go and you kill yourself to kind of look like that. And it's like, the payoff for it is great, but it like I said, it just doesn't happen. Like, you really have to kind of work for these things. And, but as far as like the other, top three things, I don't know. Honestly, I think that, like even like in the Age of Electric, my band back in Canada, we were given a gold album, in 1998, and the band had already broken up. It's like we fucking hated each other. It was like we fucking didn't want to be in the same room together. It was just a terrible scene, and we were like nominated for a Juno, which is like a Canadian Grammy.
Yeah.
And after at the Juno party, the record company gives us our gold albums, and it was just like fascinating to me that I was like, we're up for Best New Group. We've been together 10 years, and we're technically broken up right now. We're just not really like publicly broken up, and we can't stand each other, and we're all standing here for a photo together with our stupid gold albums, you know what I mean? And that's kind of that bizarre trade-off of like, I look back on that and I go, is that one of my top moments, getting a gold album? And I go, I suppose from a career standpoint, but from a personal standpoint, it was, it came with a great toll. Like, it's like, oh,
did the night go on? Did you guys sort of connect a little bit, or no?
No.
No, we fucking hated each other, and we still hated each other when we left.
And the funny thing about it is, I wouldn't say we hated each other. I just think that the business had gotten, the music had, whatever it was just so ugly at that point that it just was no fun, and nobody wanted to do it anymore, at least together. And maybe I remember it differently, but at the time it was just like, it was done. My brother tells the best story, because we were at this big party that Universal Records put on after the awards ceremony, and they give us a gold album, and at the end of the party, the sun's up, and my brother goes outside, and he realizes with his gold album under his arm that he doesn't even have money enough to get in a cab and go home.
Oh my God.
There's the music industry for you right there in attendance. He just, I don't know if he left his wallet somewhere, but I couldn't help but laugh. And he said, I remember walking home through the downtown Vancouver with this album under my arm. It's raining, and I'm like, oh my God, that is just the perfect picture of especially the Canadian music industry, because it's, it's exponentially smaller than the international kind of music business. And I just thought, well, there it is, isn't it? There's your gold album, and you're walking home through pissing rain, and he probably put it in his closet. In fact, I know he put it in his closet because he moved to Toronto years later, and I had his gold album. I just kind of found it like sitting in a closet one day, like didn't get, not that he didn't give a shit about it, but just kind of like it became less of a priority than everything else in your life.
Sure. Yeah.
So, but in a funny way, I it's on my wall now here in my house in Las Vegas, this sort of gold album, from Canada. And I take great pride in the fact that I was able to, to do something of significance, and it was recognized to some degree. And I guess that would probably have to be in many ways, because the band ended up doing a reunion tour in 2017 and we hadn't played together since 98. So that's a fascinating thing to consider. But during the Guns N' Roses reunion tour, I went back to Canada and did this run of dates and released an EP and a bunch of stuff, just doing it with those guys because it felt like this needed to happen. So
did everything get patched up?
Oh yeah. I mean, it had been for years. I think it probably like 2 years after we kind of split up, it was kind of like everything was cool.
Oh, that's
if everybody hadn't been so wrapped up in whatever else we had going on at that point, we probably would have gotten back together. But life has a funny way of, getting in the way of all those best laid plans. So actually, in a lot of ways, I would say Age of Electric getting back together is a pretty big, one of those high moments for me too, because it just was one of those great things to stand on stage with those guys after all these things that we'd accomplished together, and be able to say we don't hate each other anymore. And that's a good thing.
Did your brother have cab money home the second time back in 2017? Had things changed?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Righteous.
Rock and roll.
Hey, what were some of the low points or maybe darker periods that you've had to deal with in life, and how'd you get through them?
Well, did I mention my brother not having cab money? Well, I mean, there's always, I mean, that's the funny thing about, I mean, again, you could say this about the music industry or just about life, how like, just like you're saying, how, it all comes at a great cost. I've been through, relationships that were adversely affected by how hard, it is to be just so dedicated to something that you can often lose track of, or lose focus of other things that are just as important, or often in reality more important. You know what I mean? And I think I'm finally at a point in my life where the balance of keeping your home life and your career in some form of balance is, I mean, it's always a constant sort of learning curve, and a constant sort of you're adjusting that equation every time. Like every day you wake up and kind of like, maybe instead of
you got to make that decision every day. That's not something you decide and then it's, like you can put in adjust a meter or something. And then it just runs. No, you got to do that every day, man. I do anyway.
And I'm glad to hear that you say that too, because for me, it's sort of always been like you always kind of think like, well, if I do this, everything will be fine. And then you realize, well, what I did yesterday, I have to kind of slightly adjust or completely adjust, and that's part of life, because who I am today is not who I was 10 years ago. I'm probably not who I'm going to be 10 years from now. It's just kind of the nature of us as people shaping and changing and constantly growing. But I just think that you kind of make your, you have to prioritize everything. Life is constantly prioritizing what's really important and what can you do without. And that's, like I got, I'm not really religious about it, but I got sober. I don't even really keep track of it because it's so unimportant to me, because it wasn't like a case of like I wasn't like, I wasn't like selling my blood for drug money or anything like that.
Clearly not your gold album.
But and I don't, not to make light of how rough that addiction stuff can be, but I just sort of like, for me it was more of a professional change where I just decided I wanted to be as good as I could be, what I mean? And I think that's kind of like, that's a constant growth thing too, and a constant, working at it kind of thing. Like people go to the gym, and I'm just constantly trying to be as good as I can be as a musician and as a professional. I mean, so it's kind of like I felt like for me the party side of it became less and less important, to the point that I realized that what's the most satisfying part about what I do, and it was always like the music. You know what I mean? Playing music, recording music, writing music. That to me is infinitely more rewarding than the party afterwards or any of that stuff. So, and I realized that, when I really took a step back and I just kind of, followed what was making me happy, it never seemed to end up being the after party or any of that kind of stuff. To me, it was actually the music was the part. And then,
how old were you? How long ago did that happen?
Well, basically since I started playing with Slash, it really sort of,
so 2010.
Yeah. But even up to that point, I wasn't really, I'd started playing around Vegas, playing a lot, and I'd already kind of been in that mode of like, when you're playing 5, 6, 7 nights a week, sometimes just playing around town, to me, it was kind of like, I want to be the best I can be. I don't want to be like, oh, tonight wasn't as good because I drank too much or I was hungover or whatever. So to me, it was kind of like, I'd already kind of been in that mode for a long time, or for a while anyway, where I was kind of like, I'm just going to, do my best. And I think that kind of like started to become part of my just foundation of me as a musician and as a professional, so that I just became like, when I started with Slash, was the fascinating thing to me was Slash was not the guy with the cigarette hanging out of his mouth, kind of swaying around playing guitar, hammered. He was this fucking crazy focused machine, like, you know, and he had ambition and things to prove. And it was like really inspiring to be, it's continually inspiring to be around him because he's fucking Slash and he doesn't need to be anything. He could have just faded away and been like, yeah, that guy's the baddest motherfucker on the planet. But he wakes up every day and has a fucking plan and a goal, and he's a better guitar player than he was 10 years ago and 10 years before that. It's just, you know, he's constantly growing. So I found that really inspiring, and that probably in a lot of ways changed that side of it for me too.
Let me ask you this. When you sat down, you just said, you know, I thought about what is the most important to me and what do I like. Do you take time? Like do you take time out to think that stuff through? Or like you just randomly was going, you know what I'm saying? Because sometimes I feel like I should probably take time off to think more, just to think about me. Like, where am I at? What, you know, not like days, like I don't need to go on a fucking retreat to India to do it, but you know, just like to spend a half hour and go smoke a cigar and like have a pad in front of me and say, hey, you know, here's the top 3 things on my mind. And like almost a check in with yourself. Cause I've heard people doing that, and you know, because it sounded like I was really impressed when you just said that. I thought about this. Well, you have to spend time thinking about that. It's not like, you know, oh, I was taking a shit and in between looking at Facebook, I thought about, yeah, I should probably, you know, what makes me happy? You know, it sounds like you like sat down almost and had a conversation with yourself.
Well, that would be great. But I don't think I was ever in a position for life to slow down enough to have that kind of.
Thank you.
To have that, you know, I'm like you said, like, it's like I didn't go sit on a beach and stare off into the sunset. In reality, it was kind of like, I kind of feel more like it was Saving Private Ryan and it's just fucking on, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I always think about that. Like when I watch the, you know, the fight scene in like Gladiator or something like that war scene, you just keep swinging your sword and you don't know if you've won the war until someone's not swinging a sword.
Right.
You just stand there for a second and realize, oh, I guess we won.
Because you're right? Because you're so programmed to action.
Keep fucking swinging that sword until you know no one's swinging a sword at you anymore. You know?
I totally 100% on with you. Like, so, well, how did you come to this? Because it was a well thought out.
Well, it was well thought out, but it was also a case of like, you know, not only it isn't just like a professional aspect. I just realized that I wasn't necessarily making the best decisions for myself and my personal life and blah 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 blah. And I think I also got to a point where I kind of wanted to, like a lot of these decisions are made as I'm playing a show. And, you know, every time I'm on stage, it's sort of like, it is my intention to do my best. It doesn't mean that I don't hit a bad chord or a bad note or I fucked up the words to this or that. That happens. It's part of like when you do something, you know, 99 times, that 100th time might be like, shit,
man,
you know,
statistics, it's like,
it's just the way it goes. Yeah. So sometimes the cable went out or the amp fucked up, you know, it's just part of the nature of doing this sort of stuff. I just think it's sort of like in practice, this thing just sort of started to kind of, you know, sort of materialize. And I'd gone through periods of long sobriety many times because of this exact same idea of the discipline of like, this is my martial art. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is what I do. And this is how I have a great deal of pride in what I do. And I'm not like Alan Holdsworth, you know, like I'm not like that level of like kind of guitar player or something like that. It's more like, no, not at all. I'm like more from the Johnny Thunder school of guitar playing, but I just knew that I never wanted to be, yeah, Todd was not that great last night because he's, you know.
Yeah, but your technical acumen is mutually exclusive from your work ethic. I mean, they have nothing to do with one another.
Well, and I agree with that. Yeah, I think that's, you know, and it's also a case of your taste of what you like to do and what you enjoy and that kind of thing too. So to me, it's kind of like I just never really I was never bit by that bug that said I want to play guitar like that, you know, or I want to do that. It's kind of more like the kind of stuff that I like is the kind of stuff that I like, and that's just sort of the nature of it. But and like I said, it was all in practice. Like, it was kind of like, you know, like I said, I'm out there swinging my sword, you know, and I just kind of like realized that, you know, I swing my sword better when I'm sharp, you know, at least for me, sharp, you know. And like I said, that became that became the party. It really, and when I was honest with myself, that really was always the party. Playing music and being on stage and being in a studio and playing with my friends, that was the party. And it's the party now. It's like, I never really feel like, I have friends that say to me all the time, I live in Vegas. It's like the most happening, there's always something going on. And my friends will say, but I'm always fucking busy. Like, it's like my friends go, hey man, I'm always out there on the road, or I'm going to do a session, or I'm going to and my friends will say something like, hey man, it's, we're doing this tonight. We're going to go get something to eat here. We're going to go do that. We're going to go to this show. We're going to go to this after party. And I'm like, I wish I could go, bro, but I'm doing whatever I'm doing.
Yeah.
Recording a song. And the funniest thing is the next morning is I always get a text that says, you didn't miss anything. And I'm kind of like, always like, wow, you sure did a lot of stuff that turned out to be not anything. But I know I didn't miss anything, because I remember when I was a young man, I remember saying to an older guy I knew who was a studio owner or whatever like that. And at the time he was probably younger than I am now. But I remember saying like, hey man, what are you doing? We're going to go do this and we're going to go do that. And we're going to all these things. And he just looked at me and he went, man, I've been out. I've gone out. There's nothing you're going to do tonight that I haven't done or seen a million times. I remember looking at him like total like Obi-Wan Kenobi moment of like, what is he talking about? Like, what are you talking about? We're going to be out like having fun, and you're going to, and then I realized now that it's like, that he's right. And I think he had at whatever point had figured out what was important to him. And that's how I feel. It's like, I either want to be playing music or, with the people that I care about and doing that kind of stuff. I really don't feel like I never got that sort of Hollywood bug of like, we should be out scouring the entire city looking for that crazy fun thing to do. And I don't knock anybody who does it, because I have a lot of friends. Yeah. That's their thing. They love that they get a whole thing out of it. And like I say, I live in Vegas, so there's always something to do. But for me, it's just kind of like I kind of figured out what really gets me kind of going and what keeps me kind of going. And I think that's sort of where I landed on that, All
right, let's talk about gear for a few minutes. I know you have a signature guitar, and I'd like to talk to you about that. And then in general, what's your go-to? And I know you're a big guitar collector. That was the first, I think I just met you and you sent me a picture of a guitar. You said, here's today's take. And it was like a Firebird or something like that, if I remember correctly. What's your go-to guitar right now? What other two guitars would round out your top three? And you can include your signature model, whatever the answer is, there's no.
Well, that's kind of the funny thing about it is I feel like that's a constantly growing thing too, isn't it? I mean, like, you're like, I'm only recently, I'm staring at that 335 behind you and I'm just like, damn, dude, that is my new jam. Because my whole life, I was going to get that exact one. A friend of mine has that with the
Bigsby?
The plaque on there, whatever you call that.
Okay, so let me tell you the secret behind that. This is not a vintage guitar. What happened was, so I was in Nashville and I was talking with a guy named John Prestia. John has been Tim McGraw's tech for 20 years. He's like fucking MacGyver of guitars, right?
Wow.
So I said, I'd like to get a 335. I told him, and he knew we were going to hang out, and I went to his studio to play guitar. That guy's got guitars, man. Anyway, so we looked on the Craigslist, and there was a guitar there, a 335, but it had an aftermarket Bigsby. And so I envisioned some idiot like myself in a garage with a drill putting that thing in. And I'm like, well, I don't know if this is good. So we called the guy and I said, John, would you mind talking to him? Because I don't know what I'm doing and you do. And it turned out the guy worked at Gibson.
Oh, wow.
So they put it in right there. And that's what that custom made is they slapped that like vintage.
Yeah.
Because it was done right there at Gibson. Awesome. Yeah. So it was like a rare thing where I was actually in the right place at the right time for guitars. And it was, the guy was very fair price. And it's got the 57 classic pickups. It sounds great. it's really warm. And
that's kind of my jam. And that's my new thing right now is I'm a tall cat. I'm 6'4", almost 6'5".
Holy shit.
And I wear like things like Juniors are my favorites. SGs, I just feel like they are in many ways the perfect guitar, but they look so fucking dorky on me.
Because you're so big, yeah.
It's like, so I kind of like have in recent years been gravitating more towards the hollow bodies again, which I was always a big fan of with rockabilly and with all that kind of stuff that I really love. Just especially the looks of the guitars, the Bigsby's, all that kind of stuff to me has always been the aesthetic that I like. But when I was a kid,
dude, you're 6'5". I'm like 5'9", and you'd be like looking up to my dad or something like that. Holy crap!
Yeah, I say 6'4". My wife's like, "No, you're closer to 6'5". I go, "No, I'm 6'4". But
it's funny, when you're tall, you don't want to be taller. When you're short, you want to be taller. Grass is always greener, Todd.
Exactly. Yeah. But when I was a kid, I bought, a Les Paul. And the best thing about this, and I wish we had all been kind of wiser at this time, was at the time, no one wanted a Les Paul anymore. And a bunch of us had just recently started to kind of like to fall in love with the Les Paul again, because this would have been like 89. So I was a kid, but at the time it was like everybody was playing a Hamer or a Kramer or an Ibanez, or, like everything was a crazy colored Floyd Rose guitar. And then if somebody was, hey, somebody's selling this white Gibson Les Paul Custom. And I'm like, okay, well, I want to say it was $600 or $800. Like, I remember it being
for
like
a custom.
Yeah, dude. And I remember it being enough that as a kid, I was like, dude, I don't, you may as well have said $6,000. I was like, I don't have $600, but I managed to scrape it together. And at the time, that guitar was showroom new. Like, it was like,
wow,
white. So now it's an 82, and it's yellow.
That's badass. Yellow. Yeah.
And the headstock's been broken like 5 times over the years. And it keeps getting retired. Like, it keeps getting put away as like, okay, you've served your time well, sir. But it always comes back out. And it's funny because I have this conversation with Slash all the time. He doesn't like ebony fretboards. He says they're too bright.
Oh, I love them, man.
I always loved it. I think it's the shit. And I mean, that's the guitar that I always kind of go to. I'm not a massive, I don't have a whole lot of vintage stuff because I just kind of, I'm kind of always, I always want to play those guitars. Like, I look at guys like Bonamassa and I go, that's so awesome that he takes like 59s and 58s and stuff on the road with him. Like, I'm like, damn, that is the coolest thing ever. Because most of us go, even if I had a 59, it'd be like, under lock and key. And it'd be like a retinal scan thing going on. But it's like, he's like got them on stage. I'm like, man, that is awesome. That's so great. But I've never really met a guitar I didn't like. And I know that's a weird thing to say. And a lot of my friends will be like, no, I hate that guitar. That guitar is stupid. And I go, yeah, but I remember a friend of mine once saying, there's a song in every guitar. And I kind of feel like the same way. Like, you pick up a guitar and you go, sometimes it feels weird. Like, it's like you're kind of fighting it a little bit. You know what I mean? But you kind of somehow find like you play something a little differently on it. And the next thing you know, you come up with a riff. And the next thing you know, you're kind of chasing something down and you got something going on. And I think that's the coolest thing about guitars in general, is that every time you pick up the guitar, you could come up with something. And man, if you're as crazy as as I am when it comes to this kind of stuff, that you can come up with a song that can change everything. You know what I mean? I think that's kind of the beauty of creating, is it's you might come up with a riff that you might forget in half an hour, or you might come up with something that might entirely change your life and become something, it's on a movie soundtrack, or, you never know. I mean, that's the cool thing about creating, is that you should never really stop. And I've been guilty of like going through periods of like getting distracted by other things and not being creative. But I constantly try to prod myself to kind of, okay, go pick up that guitar and see what's shakes loose today, that kind of thing. I think that's kind of and that's why I have a lot of guitars, but I wouldn't say I have a lot of, there's quite a few pieces that I would say, yeah, I love this one, and yeah, I love that one, and this was a wacky one that I found along the way, and that kind of stuff. But I definitely, that's kind of also the fun thing about it, is I'm always looking for something else, and that particularly the red. What I really dig is the red ES 335. I think it might be a 339. I'm not sure. That has the.
They're a little. You don't get a 339. They're smaller. If you're concerned about size, oh my God, yeah, that would not be good because I find them small and I'm 8 inches shorter than you.
I'm thinking of the ES335 that has the custom, the Les Paul custom specs on it, like the block inlays and the diamond on the headstock. That thing is fucking bitching, and I'm kind of like constantly like, I'll find you, and you. Will
Frank's got that nice hollow body, and he talked about he stuffed. What's that?
Frank's got a bunch.
Yeah. He stuffed a styrofoam block in there or something like that to prevent the feedback, if I remember.
He's got one of the ones that's completely hollow. I forget which one that is, but it's like, the one that doesn't have the solid block down the middle. So, he's got such great taste in guitars too. He's not like me where I'll go like, look at this ugly, misfit toy. He's kind of more like a higher end taste on what he likes. But, I that's kind of where I'm at, is it's constantly like, and I'm not a kind of a gear nut. Like I kind of like, I'm kind of that guy that goes, just the other day we were jamming and I was just playing my old P bass because I've been playing my signature bass for so long that I kind of like, I plugged in a P bass, and it's funny to say, take a P bass and plug it into an old SVT Ampeg, and I go, but there it is. It's like, that's just this, it's been like tried and true. It's the same as taking the Gibson Les Paul and plugging it into a Marshall. It's kind of like, well, there's that. I mean, like you really can't reinvent that wheel. It's perfect as it is. So, but that's why in a lot of ways with the signature guitar that I came up with, which did really, I mean,
talk about that. It's with Prestige Guitars out of Canada.
Yeah, Prestige is out of Vancouver, and I've been friends with Mike, the owner of that company, for 20 years probably. Maybe, I don't even know. We've kind of lost track. And he just started developing his own guitars, and they actually were based on a lot of the ideas that I was talking about: hollow bodies, Bigsby's, and stuff like that I really dug. And then when I kind of got into in recent years, I started developing an idea for a bass to play with Slash, because it was such a specialized and specific thing with Slash that I found like I didn't really feel like, okay, well now I've got, a fretless over here and an 8-string. It was kind of like, no, I would literally do the entire show with this kind of one sound. And I think that that's kind of the beauty of it to me is what I like about, that's my particular favorite kind of thing, is when you hear Slash play guitar, you go, that's Slash.
Right.
Or Angus Young, you go, that's Angus Young. To me, it's kind of like when you kind of find something, that's your thing. You know what I mean? So to me, it wasn't really so much about being like a session player is the kind of guy who can, play you a jazz thing and play you a rockabilly thing and then play you a heavy metal thing. And I'm kind of, I can get around, but I'm very much sort of like, I wanted it. I was always sort of looking for the idea of like, this is my sound. This is when we started kind of working on World on Fire in 2012, and we were really obsessed with I can't remember which Motorhead album we were listening to. It was a new Motorhead album at the time, and Lemmy's bass sound was fucking off the charts because they finally found this way of taking Lemmy's particular, like an old Marshall guitar amp he was using for his bass tone, which he'd always sort of had this kind of very pointed, loud bass tone. But they'd also found this way to kind of sneak in this kind of low end, be it an SVT or something bass. So they kind of found this really awesome mix of where the low end is still very present, but there's this really kind of gnarly tone on top. And that's kind of what we sort of started to really kind of play with, was this finding something in that world for what I do. And if you listen to World on Fire and even Apocalyptic Love, we were doing that in 2000. No, that was 2012. So in 2014 was World on Fire when I really started to kind of focus on that. And then more recently was when I kind of used the actual signature bass. And that's, it literally is these hotly wound Thunderbird style pickups in it. And it's like an on-off switch. And I literally have like one volume knob, and it's like, because I found in the Slash show, it's like less is more. It literally is like.
So there's no tone on there.
No tone. Like I have my tone wound all the way up.
Are they Are they active pickups?
No, they're
passive pickups. Interesting.
That became I kind of, gone back and forth in so many places and always landed back in this passive world of just the way that they kind of, the way it kind of works, with this high octane output. You know what I mean? So, and I always love that, the rig rundown of like Angus Young's stuff and Malcolm Young's stuff was always like, here's the guitar. Malcolm Young's guitar would always make me laugh because it's like a 3 pickup duo jet or something with 1 pickup left in it. Everything else is blocked off. It's like literally a volume knob, and you just plug it into the Marshall, and that's the sound. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like perfect. Like to me, it's like that is so rock and roll to be like, wang. And that to be said is like, I'm still fascinated when I look at the Edge or something like that's rig, and you just go, what is going on?
He invented his own. He invented a totally new thing there.
And that's the beauty of that. But I know for myself, I come from a school of less is more, and that's the same thing when it comes to guitars. It's sort of like my friends will show up with these like surfboards full of pedals, and I'll be like, okay, I'm gonna do this. Just kind of plug it and play.
Yeah.
And that's why the Anti-Star guitar that I built, the Anti-Star bass and then the Anti-Star 6 is the 6-string guitar. And we introduced it at NAMM. I started working on the bass, and then the Guns N' Roses reunion happened, so that this bass I developed and intended to take on stage, we went through a couple of years of a Guns N' Roses reunion where I wasn't on stage with Slash, and I find myself playing a lot more guitar.
Okay.
So I decided, well, let's take the design that we're working on for the bass and develop the 6-string version. And then we developed the Anti-Star 6, and we took it to NAMM in 2017, I guess. I'm trying to figure out exactly. It might have been 2016. It was the initial one. And, we got a Best of NAMM nod.
Oh, that's very cool.
Guitar World gave us a platinum award for the guitar. It was, it was a really crazy thing to just, it was a very simple design of Firebird-ish kind of.
Right.
I've always liked larger, a lot of wood and a lot of stuff. And it has what I consider relatively, my favorite thing is always a sort of a vintage meets radical a little bit, like with a sort of like Billy Gibbons and Rick Nielsen and I always feel like I could really hang with those guys as far as like finding these guitars that are like, they're really vintage aspects, but something's always kind of radically different about it, be it the finish or some kind of slight variation in the shape. And so I kind of, that's kind of where I lean. But so I mean, the fact that the guitar did so well is it's to me, for a guy, like I literally was that kid staring in guitar magazines, just drooling over like, just different shapes, knowing like the ins and outs of so many different kind of guitars. And then when it came time to design something, it was just kind of like taking all these little things and what I do like and putting them into one guitar or one bass for that matter.
Well, dude, that is really cool that you got your own signature guitar. Congratulations. Is that I like the name of it, the Anti-Star.
Yeah. It's a whole other thing, but it's kind of like we developed a logo out of it and everything. And oddly enough, I stole it from this, there's a great documentary about the Sex Pistols called The Filth and the Fury. And Sid Vicious, they just show a voiceover of him talking about Johnny Rotten, and he says something. He just says he was just the total anti-star. Like he just kind of like everything about him was not what you would have been considered a pop star at that time. And I remember thinking, what a great term that is. This kind of like, and it kind of plays into what I was saying before about not liking the term fan. And I sort of take the idea of like, like I like the blue collarism of being a musician, and I could be replaced at any given moment. And the music industry is such that you're constantly being replaced because it can be youth oriented, or it can be kind of like everybody's kind of looking for something fresh, something new, something kind of. So I kind of like it's really easy to get caught up in the idea and how fucking awesome I am and how great, how many people tell me how great I am. But it's like you can easily get.
Get not you, but someone thinks like that. Let them get cancer, or their wife gets cancer, and then tell me how fucking awesome you are. Or your kid is in a fucking accident or something like that.
That's the big that's karmic realignment that happens.
You don't want to have to go down that path, man. You know, to get leveled back to brought to earth. You know, it's just not necessary.
And that's why, you know, I mean, I know it sounds like a heady explanation for something that just sounds like a cool name, like Anti-Star, and it's kind of like, well, no, there's actually I actually put some thought into why I call it that. And I don't know that everybody's ever, you know, really thought about it in the way that I think about it. But to me, it's always like, you know, I don't consider myself a star. I'm a fucking musician. You know, I wake up every day and I go to work, you know, and I remember reading an article with Stephen King or an interview once where he said, you know, he wakes up every day and makes a cup of coffee and he goes to work. Like, it's like putting a hard hat on. He sits down and writes for however many hours a day, and some of it's usable, some of it's not, but he goes to fucking work. And I kind of feel the same way. And I always have to kick myself in the ass because there's always something on TV or, you know, there's always something else to do, but you kind of have to go when you don't actually have a clock to punch. It's like, you know, you kind of have to be your own boss that way and sort of go, hey man, is there something you could be doing right now that could be luckily it's pretty fun for me. Like, I like playing music and I like making up shit, and I like kind of failing, you know, like I like the idea of like, well, that didn't work very well. Oh, well, you know, and that's part of the fun of it is like, you're dreaming. If you think Paul McCartney sits down every day and comes up with something that's like, as, you know, as classic as he's obviously come up with, it's just the nature of being a creative person. There are sometimes you're going to come up with something great, and sometimes you're just going to
shit the bed.
Yeah, it's just and that's just life, you know. It's like, you know, you're just not always gonna hit the bullseye every time.
No, far from it. We just talked about it earlier before we were recording. It was maybe 2 or 3 times out of 10 if you're lucky. But when you hit, it's pretty cool.
But you got to keep swinging.
Yeah.
You know,
hey, 3 more questions, Todd, and I really this is cool. We could talk about Malcolm Gladwell and Malcolm Young in the same call. That's my kind of conversation. I'm digging that. Tough question, man. What do you like most about yourself?
About myself? Wow, these are good questions. You should be doing this.
Well, like, do you know who Pete Anderson is?
I do.
He's in LA. He's kind of like, he was Dwight Yoakam's guitar player forever. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. White hair. He's always at NAMM. Great player. He's got a couple of guitars at Reverend, really good guy. Been around a long time. Real funny. And he said, you know, we're having an interview, and he goes, you know what, Craig? He goes, I got to tell you what, man. I told my wife this morning, this is the last fucking interview I'm doing. I can't stand getting interviews. All these guys ask me the same fucking question. They should just go on Google. So he goes, I just want you to know the first 4 questions I'd never been asked before. He goes, you're coming to LA and we're having tacos. When I'm like, I don't want to ask you, like, okay, so where does the muse come from? Like, fuck, you know, well, I'm taking a crap and I think I'm in the gym, you know, whatever, you know, I mean, let's like, I don't want to know about that. You know? Well, like, I wouldn't ask you that in real life. So how do you get your ideas? Do you play 9s or 10? I mean, like, that's embarrassed to me. I want to, like, you know, like, learn about you, you know, because I've learned a lot during this call. You know, you said a couple of things that were cool. And like, I thought, you know, I got to start doing some of these. Like, I made a note. I got to start taking once a week, just 15 minutes I've got to start sitting down and assimilating ideas better, because I realize that I can't progress the way I want to unless I'm putting the time in. And I don't expect, like, you know, progression, as you know, it's like, if you go 1% every month, that's a lot of progression. It is. So I'm not looking to say, like, okay, I'm going from 0 to 100 after that cigar on Saturday. That's not. But if I don't do anything, you know, nothing happens. You know. Well,
and that's the hard part. Is you know, I think sometimes life can be this kind of. It'd be like looking down at your desk and just seeing a whole mess of papers. You know, and it's kind of like, and you go, fuck, I don't know where to begin. You know, it's like, And sometimes it's just a case of like just picking up that one piece of paper and going, okay, let's start with this. You know what I mean? And I think that's, and I of course, when I'm doing an interview like this or we're talking about it, it all sounds like I know what the fuck I'm talking about. But a lot of times, you know, but a lot of it is kind of like, you know, is that I don't think anybody knows what they're talking about in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? Like for every person that can sort of like, I'm sure Anthony Robbins has fucking crazy days. You know what I'm saying?
Let me tell you, everybody has, that's why I'm really comfortable doing these. And I don't mean this in a presumptuous way. I'm not starstruck because I know everybody's got the same shit to deal with. Your kids don't listen to you. No matter how much money you have, you got to figure out how to get more. It's a hustle. You got too much shit on your to-do list. You have to figure out a way to get along with your partner or spouse or whatever. Man, we're all really not that different. Everybody has different skill sets, but as humans, we're all fucking fighting the good fight every day. It's just like, get up and how can I get through today and put a smile, hopefully, put a smile on my face, and, Anthony Robbins is honestly, it's like, there's endlessly positive people. I mean, and I consider myself kind of one of them in a lot of ways. Yeah, 100%.
But I know that, I know who I really am. I think that's what you have to be realistic with yourself and say, I know I got bad days. And I know there's days where I'm like, why am I so annoyed with the traffic today or whatever it is? It's kind of like you realize that you constantly tell yourself, look, life is, it's just a constant test. Like every day you wake up and you go, we're going to get through this and we're going to fucking make it the best we can and blah, 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 blah. But that doesn't mean you don't, there aren't going to be days where you just get kicked right in the balls. And
absolutely, man. That's why. No, you go. Sorry.
No, I was going to say when you ask me what I like about myself, it's kind of a fascinating, it's such a fascinating, like, where you turn the mirror around and look at yourself and go, damn, because I think it's human nature to be constantly sort of like looking to improve or looking to what can I do to make things better for myself? Or what can I do to make things to improve as a father, as a husband, as a brother, as a son, every single different hat that we're born wearing, and then all the ones that we acquire along the way. I think I'm a generally positive kind of minded guy. I think I'm a good time to be around, like as far as like, I like to have a laugh. I think when it comes to things like the creative aspect, I think I'm probably fun to collaborate with. It doesn't mean it's always going to be productive because I really don't think that there's necessarily you could put the.
You can't measure that really. What does productive mean? Sells exactly. 1 million or, how do you just had a good time. You wrote it. Yeah. That's a really, that's a tough word to measure, to even evaluate yourself at some time. And I'm guilty of that too, because like, you can spend all day coming up with a line. Does that mean it was less productive than the day but it's really works?
Yeah.
Then when you write a whole song in 15 minutes, does that mean it's really hard to do that shit, man?
And that's why I think it's, sometimes you can have a session, say, where you sit down and write something. And that's the same thing when I talked about Stephen King before. I know Stephen King probably sits down for however many hours a day. And maybe on that Wednesday, he didn't use anything he did that day.
Right.
But I think the creative process is a lot like going to the gym, where you're kind of like, you're constantly working that part of yourself so that you're not fatiguing that part of yourself because when things become atrophied, it's kind of like you have to kind of rework those kind of things. And I'm constantly doing that to myself, where I go through periods of like, because the road can be really hard to be creative on. A lot of people have a hard time being creative on the road. So you constantly have to kind of like sit there and poke at yourself like, come on, man, here we go. But
every day your environment's different. It's got to be. I hadn't thought about that because when you're creating, you want stability around you so you can go up here and go nuts.
But a lot of people do kind of get a lot out of the constant change and the constant sort of like motion of it all. And in a lot of ways, I think sometimes we confuse the busyness of life with productivity.
Yeah.
It's like kind of like, and I'm very aware of like, just because I'm busy doesn't necessarily mean I'm being productive. It's like life just goes so fucking fast that like, like even today I'm like, dude, it's almost May. Like, it's like, that part of me just kind of like, I just want to put the brakes on life all the time. To think that 2020 is around the corner is like, trips me out, And when you're like, how like you just kind of like we're not there yet, but it's always that feeling of like, are we talking about where we're going for Christmas already? Like, yeah, it just feels like we just had this conversation and now we're doing it again. But that's the nature of how life kind of can get away from you. And I think that that's part of those things that I like about myself, you know, if I have to be honest, which is something I've never really thought about, is, you know, that I think that I think that a positive for myself is that I'm constantly looking to try and to excite myself, you know. And I think that in recent years, it's been things like, you know, I find myself maybe a little bit, as we get older, we start to get less and less open to newer music. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just part of the thing of like when I listen to my friends complain about, you know, I don't know, take your pick of new acts and new musicians. And I just look at my friend and I just start laughing. I go, dude, you sound like our fucking parents.
Yeah. Right.
So we're not supposed to be talking about the kids and their haircuts and their clothing. And I go, cause that's what everybody said about us. Right. And it wasn't that long ago. You know, it's like, I realize now when I go back, sometimes you go back and listen to the music that you were into as a kid, and you'll think to yourself, like, some of it will stand up and you go, fuck yeah, this is great. And sometimes you'll listen to something and go, this is pretty corny. And I guess I had to be 15
to enjoy that. Yeah.
And you'll think to yourself, maybe my parents weren't necessarily offended by this music. Maybe they just thought it was fucking stupid.
Right.
And I think that that's part of, you know, so when I watch my friends kind of, you know, bitch about take your pick, I just go, that's because this music that young people listening to isn't intended for us, just like our music wasn't intended for our parents, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the way it's going to go to the end of time. But I find myself relatively, you know, like going through phases of being unplugged, and sometimes newer music doesn't connect with me because it's not supposed to, because I'm not.
No, it's totally not supposed to. Right. That's the thing.
And that's okay. But at the same time, it's like when I watch my friends bitch about there's fucking no rock and roll at the Grammys, and there's like, no, and I go, dude, when I was a kid, tell me who the rock and roll band was at the Grammys. I loved Iggy Pop and the MC5 and Kiss and the Ramones. Those fucking bands weren't on anything.
Yeah.
You know, all my favorite music was always something I had to go and find anyway. You know what I mean? So I can't, like, I just find it kind of like, what was this fantasy world you were living in where all these great bands this whole setting? Like, I'm not knocking the Grammys or anything. I just it's not where I was.
Dude, you're so Canadian. You're like, I'm not knocking the Grammys. I don't want anybody to think I'm offending the Grammys.
Yeah, suddenly I'll be getting these.
Sorry, man. I had to caught that. It's funny, man. Canadians and like
to the end.
English people are like so. My wife's from England. You know?
I remember you saying that. Yeah, and it's always a constant like Mike Myers calls it a Canadian standoff is two guys standing at a door going, after you.
Yeah.
No,
yeah, it's funny, man.
It's, you know, it's sort of true. Like I just sort of always say, like, you know, I have to kind of, and that's what's the best part about music, is it's kind of like being, you know, where you hear something. And I think that's kind of the fun part about, as much as the internet has been really hard on the music industry, it's fun being like flipping around on Sirius XM and going, like, and go, what the fuck is this? I've never heard this before. Dude, I listen to the Underground Garage, which plays a lot of old school shit. And I'm like, how do I not know like this song?
Yeah.
And then, but then a lot of newer stuff too. And I gotta be honest, like guys like Joe Bonamassa, he kind of got past me for years. Like I'm a guitar player, but I'm also the kind of like, I'm not necessarily all that easily impressed by shreddiness. I kind of go, I'm kind of like, yeah, great. That guy's a great guitar player, but it doesn't necessarily stay with me in a funny way. Like, I've always liked country shredding and rockabilly shredding. That kind of stuff. I don't even know what's going on. Like, I'm watching these guys and I go, I don't know what's going on.
They got every finger activated all at once. I know it's incredible. It's like they're drumming. It's like being a drummer with their fingers, sort of.
100%.
Yeah.
And then, but then in the world of, say, blues or heavy metal, I find, you know, the whole genre is shredding. You know, the whole thing is about playing your fucking brains out. And I find that the blues is such a specific thing too, because you can listen to one blues player and go like, God damn, like just get something out of it. And I'll watch other guys and I'll go, well, he's playing all this stuff, but I'm not necessarily feeling it. And that's just because it's subjective and up to yourself. So guys like Bonamassa comes along and he's around and I see him on the cover of magazines. I go, okay, cool. I've met him. He's a wonderful guy. But I just found myself kind of like, relatively ignorant to it just by sheer sort of like wrapped up in my life and liking what I like and doing what I do. And then one day I go, who the hell is this? And someone goes, that's Joe Bonamassa. I go, holy fuck, I didn't know he could sing like that. Like, dude, is he playing like an actual 59? Like, oh yeah, dude, he picks him up. And I go, what? And I find myself like between him, Gary Clark Jr., and a bunch of these kind of guitar guys who are in a lot of ways not reinventing any wheel, but in many ways reinventing a wheel. You know what I mean? Like they're kind of like doing what they do so incredibly well that I'm like, it's kind of lit this fire under me that I'm kind of like, where you watch a guy, Gary Clark Jr. I find really fascinating because he's not a shredder. He's more like a long notes, long feel, and I go, whoa, like that. And it sort of scratches me where I itch sometimes where I go, wow, okay, I want to do that. And it makes me, and for some reason I find myself like, when you find yourself plugging your guitar into an amp and going, who made me want to do this? Gary Clark Jr. He's 10 years younger than me. I don't even know how old he is. Like, he's one younger. I find that kind of like, that's the awesome thing about music is that this kind of like constant, you're always going to find something you don't know about, and as much of a fan of music that I am, I've had so many phases like that Rolling Stones rabbit hole is a fucking awesome rabbit hole to go down. Or take your pick, like all the Beatles. I still live in that Beatles one. I'll never get tired of that. But then every now and then I go like, in recent years, this is a weird thing to say, but I as a young man, I was sort of like really into aggressive, noisy punk rock. I loved all the stuff that those bands did, and some of my friends were super militant about like, you can't like the Ramones and like Pink Floyd. It's like, you can't, like, that's not, but I always felt fortunate enough to be from a small town where it was all kind of a melting pot of, you just like what you like. You don't really kind of,
I never heard that. Yeah, that's weird.
You don't really go like, you're not allowed to like Led Zeppelin if you like Iggy Pop, and I was kind of like, I like that. Why not? This is fucking awesome. This is fucking awesome. But I went through a whole, like, I didn't really spend a lot of time with bands like Pink Floyd. And then in recent years, I've been like, I would always hear it and I go, that Dave Gilmour is a fucking sick guitar player.
That's literally my favorite player. I've been a huge Gilmour fan my whole, number one. I mean, he moves me. He does it for me, man. And
I've said that about him even before I really was a huge Pink Floyd listener. If you would have asked me like guys like Joe Walsh, even like, I'm not even like,
oh, great player.
I'm not a huge like Eagles guy or anything like that. But I go, when that guy plays guitar, I stop what I'm doing and I go, who is that?
He's amazing.
And I think that these different like rabbit holes, like I love Jimi Hendrix, but I never really had a phase where I just listened to nothing but Jimi Hendrix, where I did have that with Led Zeppelin, and I did have that with the Ramones, and I did have that with any number of bands. And now I find myself kind of going like, hey, like all these years later, looking at my friend and going like, have you heard Axis Bold as Love? And I'm going,
one of the most popular albums for guitar players.
I go, yeah, dude, 30 years ago. I'm like, and I'm just only kind of like now going like, I've always been massively respectful, but I just, that's the awesome thing about music is that I think that's going back to your previous thing about what do I like about myself? I think I'm constantly searching, and not searching like in a desperate way, but kind of like
curious,
bitten by these, curious and bitten by these bugs of like having a Bob Dylan phase where I'm like, I had no idea that this guy who was like, who everybody could have the argument that he can't sing or he can't, and I was always like, have you listened to this stuff?
Oh, it's the lyrics, yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that there's 6 verses in this song and each one is more in depth than the last, and I find it kind of constantly inspiring. So I think it's just a kind of a constant hunger for like finding something new and finding something fresh. And they all kind of feel like courses I took. Like when I was like a kid, I got really into the Who. as one of the first bands where like bands like where the Beatles felt like that's not an attainable thing. I can't be a Beatle. That's like saying I want to be able to fly. You know,
right.
Like that's not a thing. You know, being Elvis Presley is like, you know, he was sent to us from on high. That's not a goal. You know. And then all of a sudden one day I looked at the Who and I said, look at that tall skinny guy bashing the shit out of that guitar. I go, and it just resonated with me in that way that I go, I want to do that, you know? And I think that I kind of, all of that stuff is inside me as like a course I took, like the Who course. I did really well at that. I know a lot about that, you know? And when I go jigga-jang, I go, that's Pete Townsend. And when I do this, that's Pete Townsend, you know? But I feel like that course, there's so many courses to take. And the Jimi Hendrix course is, you know, and the Dave Gilmour course or the Joe Bonamassa and Gary Clark Jr. courses that are presenting themselves are like things like, dude, I never really, because I've always been sort of like suspicious of the kind of like, look at me kind of guitar players. Like I love Angus Young because I think he serves the songs, you know. I mean, there's a lot of look at me. I'm wearing a schoolboy outfit and I'm running around like a maniac, but it is kind of like it serves its purpose. And I think that Slash taught me a lot in that he's not a singer, you know, and he isn't really evocative. He's not the kind of, when you know him as a person, you get to know him. He's much more reserved he's just kind of like a bit more chill. You know what I mean? Like he's very California chill. But when he's playing guitar, he's saying everything. You know what I mean?
Right.
He's not holding back anything. And that's how he sings and that's how he speaks and that's how he communicates. And that's why so many people resonate with what he's saying and what he's doing. And I think that that's kind of like, to me, really kind of opened my eyes to like what can be said and what can be done with the electric guitar or with the guitar in general. You know? And I think that that's going back to that thing. What's positive about me? I'm been doing this a long fucking time. And I'm going to be doing this. There's no retirement plan. I was saying that, you know, recently I was saying, sitting in a restaurant, I go, that'll be me over in that corner playing because I'm years old because I don't have any interest in like retiring and not for financial reasons. It's just, I don't really, what's the point of retiring when you play music?
You play music with
there's no retirement. I love doing this. So to me, it's like a constant like feeling inspired, you know, and I'm feeling kind of like, wow, dude, like, and that's recently been my thing of like, you know, in finding this, these kind of guitar players and this kind of music and making me go, I want to plug my guitar in and just play. And that's exciting to me. And it's funny thing is like, but that's exactly what I wanted to do when I was like 12. Yeah. You know, and it's like, so is it a state of arrested development or is it some sort of full circle thing?
No, it's passion, man. It's just enthusiasm for what you do. You know,
I hope so. You know, I think it's kind of maybe it's an avoidance of reality, but that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're just enjoying what you do. It sounds great.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can keep my roll of questions going. We've got 2 left. Toughest decision you've had to make or most difficult thing you've ever had to do?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is when in joining Slash's band was not like a slam dunk of a thing, even though it might be weird for someone to hear that. But it's kind of like I said before,
you had a lot of shit going on. No,
I had my own stuff going on. I had a band here in Vegas, and we had just released a CD and a compact disc for those that are under 30.
That's good. Touche.
we were like working towards doing stuff, and we had a whole thing going on in town, and you know, I was working a lot. Like I said, I was already buying a house and being like, you know, having like, you know, things were kind of happening for me before the Slash thing even kind of came along.
When did you move to the States full time?
I've been coming down here I've been honestly coming to the States since the 90s, the early 90s. I first met Slash in 1991, I think, when my band was playing in Los Angeles and just kind of trying to get signed and all that kind of shit. So for years, like I had management up in New York. Our record deal was out of New York. So, I mean, we spent a lot of time in the US, but I didn't actually officially move. I didn't even officially move. Like I said before, I came down here in 2006 and started doing some stuff. I had a lot going on back at home, and I thought, well, I'll apply for a visa, and if it works out, great. If it doesn't, I'll go home. I got shit going on. So the visa worked out, and it just sort of all,
So you moved down permanently in 06 or 07?
Yeah, technically it's the end of 06, and I guess the decision to, and again, like I said, it wasn't really a permanent thing. I was kind of bouncing back and forth between Vancouver and Canada, Vancouver and Las Vegas until I just realized one day, I guess I live in the States. I just kind of, that this is where I am. And then the Slash thing really kind of cemented it as far as, but even then, like when I joined Slash, it wasn't kind of like, and then you'll be doing this till, you'll still be doing it in 2019. At the time, it was kind of like, I thought maybe we'd be like supporting his current record and that'd be it. Like, kind of like.
Oh, right. So that's why, so I get it why it was not an easy decision, because you had a whole shit booked, and here you're great opportunity, but there's two sides of a great opportunity. It's duration is one of them.
Well, and that's the thing, as a musician, as a working musician, and I always try to, in Vegas, the thing that I really appreciated was I became acquainted and very good friends now with tons of working musicians, and our whole job is fucking hustle. Everybody's hustling, fucking, as my friend would say, I always quote Doc Ellis. He plays in my band, Original Sin, here in Vegas. He's one of those guys. He's just got all those great working musician kind of quotes, but he always says, you were looking for a gig before you got this one, and you'll be looking for another one when this one's gone. And it's such a have gun will travel kind of thing that you're like, that's 100% what it is. Like you're always hustling, but I dig that. And I dig the energy of that. Like, kind of like you got something going on, but it only goes till Saturday. What are you going to do after that? Hustle, man.
Yeah.
And that's part of the energy that just kind of keeps you moving. And it's nice when some gig comes along, and I didn't really feel like the Slash gig. I didn't really get that cozy thing going on until, to be honest, around World on Fire, which was about 6 years into the Slash gig. I ever kind of finally go like, oh, this is happening. Like, this is a thing. And then we did that run, and then the Guns N' Roses reunion happened. So it was kind of like this funny, like I'd sort of settled into the routine of it to some degree. Like I started to kind of like get comfortable, I think. And then all of a sudden there was the big wake up call of like, I'm going back and doing Guns N' Roses for a couple of years. So I was like, oh, okay. And as his bro, I was like, you have to do that.
Yeah.
Of course you have to do that. That's history of rock and roll happening right in front of my eyes. Like 1 degree away from me,
Yeah.
And, but it was sort of like, then it was like, you kind of feel that the hustle spark go, boom, it's time. And I like that. And I feel that all the time. And I like, constantly working on new music, constantly doing this and that. Cause I think that, as soon as things get comfortable, that's when it's dangerous, then I think you kind of have to worry about that.
It's funny. You mentioned that. It reminds me of, I took a course on real estate investing a while back, and one of the teachers said, never buy a house, an investment property, when you have money. He says, always buy them when you're broke, because you'll make so much better decisions. You'll negotiate better. You'll have, and I was like, and so I try to keep that in mind, not for buying, but in general, what's the optimal mindset I have when I need to go in there so that I can, not for buying house, but for everything, so I can have the optimal result. And I think it was important because your mind, you have so many different things going on. So I was that's what's kind of weird. I mean, it's funny because I'm such a rock and roll fan that I read basically every rock and roll bio that gets put out. I'm that kind of guy. I read pretty constantly. And, but I always love the rock and roll bio stuff because I'm a nerd and I love rock and roll. And I remember reading the Rod Stewart one, and it was like, because there's always kind of a story, like we struggled and we killed ourselves and we got the gig, and then, this and that. And then there was a divorce and the drug habit, and there's always kind of up and down and up and down. And with Rod Stewart's story, I just found it kind of so funny that it was kind of like, well, I became a rock star when I was like 20, and now here's like 10 more chapters about how awesome being Rod Stewart is. It's like it was kind of there wasn't never like a financial problem. There was never, the worst thing that happened to him was some divorces. Well, he's had multiple divorces, but you have so much, he's got so much money. It's almost like you own a business, And, there's this one thing we do in the business. It's a little iffy, but it makes us so much money that, we could take 50% of our profits every 5 years and pay for that thing, and it's still worth it.
Exactly.
That's his divorce.
Kind of like, I honestly don't know what life would be like, and I don't know what I would be like if I had found that kind of security at 23 years old. I honestly don't know what I think. I love music so much that I would obviously keep doing it.
Yeah.
But I think it changes your entire, like you say, like that whole thing about being broke and buying a house. Yeah, you got to hustle and you got to make it work. And right. I think that's life in general. And for most people, it's kind of like whatever it is, you got to make it work.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with life is high risk. Everything's high risk. It's just the way it has to be. I don't remember what this question was. So
no, it was the toughest thing you had to do, what you said. But I got to tell you, I just want to add to your, you say you like most about yourself. And I said this to you before we started recording. You are such a positive guy. Like, you're really very pleasant. Not just Canadian pleasant, we didn't talk a lot, but I was like, wow, this guy's so polite. He's just a positive, nice guy. So you're giving out it's
embarrassing as a Canadian that it's just he's very Canadian.
He's very Canadian. No, it was all good. Like you,
like talk to my wife about all the.
Is she Canadian or is she American?
Noise I make. She's Canadian.
Oh, is she?
She's very polite too.
And last question, Todd, biggest change in your personality over the last 10 years, and how much of that change has been intentional and how much is just a natural part of aging?
Well, I think that, there's that's a good question, whether it's intentional or whether it's sort of just something you kind of settle into. But I think when my personal life is so much more of it's more of a priority. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like, I realized after kind of like coasting through my personal life in the past, where it's kind of like, you're sort of so focused on your career and everything else that you just kind of expect all this other stuff to kind of figure itself out. And then you realize that you get kicked in the balls by that. Yeah. Multiple times when you realize, oh, this is,
I have to put effort into this as well. Fuck, man.
I realize now that I think of it as like a garden or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, I can't just go, I put the seeds in that, now I just fucking forget about it. You're constantly out there watering it, and I don't know how to garden, so I don't know what I'm talking about, but I assume it's a lot like that, because that's how I feel like, or owning a house plant, if I may dumb down the idea of the most important relationship in your life down to this, but it's true. When you leave your house for a week, what do you do with this? Or I suppose pet ownership is a similar idea, but I realize that it's a constant, the sun and the water and the moving this thing to make sure it's getting enough oxygen. And I think that it's impossible to imagine, because it's so important to you, that it's not a chore to do that. It is your pleasure to do that. She's listening with a smile, like, oh, sure.
Good brownie points here, mister.
but it's true, because I think in the past, it's hard to regret, because, all these things that have gone wrong in your life, quote unquote wrong, have led to where you are. And I am, have never been happier than I am now. And I realize that, it's so much of like what you put into it is what you get out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that you have to kind of, I'm glad that kind of, all the black eyes and broken ribs and everything that life has given to you and that love has given to you, that you come out the other side and you realize that, not only that stuff, but the other things that you kind of really have to remind yourself to not sweat the small stuff,
Totally, man.
Because life, life can be as awesome as like, this is an amazing cup of coffee. You're sitting there.
It's all your attitude.
Yeah, it really is. And it's kind of like, you feel like this is going to be a good day because this is a great cup of coffee and we're going to go do this and that. And I think that I think that when I was younger, I had been around so much opposition, be it, playing for audiences that basically don't want to hear you, and playing music which had not been a widely positively refused thing from your family. Not that they were opposed to it, because I realized, your rebelliousness of like, I'll fucking show them.
Right.
When you realize that as a parent now,
right,
you realize that, no, my parents weren't saying they don't want me to play music. They wanted me to be okay. You know what I mean? And that's a big difference. And I think that, you're constantly, as an adult now, having to take a step back and kind of look at things and go, even recently, like when friends are like looking at a bigger house, I immediately get that kind of like, maybe we need a bigger house, and you go, why do I need a bigger house? I like our house, and we like our neighborhood, and we like our neighbors, and we like how the coffee shops like right over the, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you kind of remind yourself, that you have to remind yourself all the time that everything's just fine. I don't know what we're it's human nature, and I think maybe a Western thing in our culture.
Oh, totally. Of competitive, of like, I want to.
And competitive with yourself too.
Yeah.
Like, there's no such thing as good enough, and which I think is a good thing too. It's always good to have ambition. It's always good to have things that you're still trying to achieve and still things that you're trying to accomplish. But I think that's basically in long form would be landing on this thing of like prioritizing your personal life with professional life and making the best of things. Making the best of what seems like a drag. This fucking traffic, and you're like, hey man. And my wife constantly reminds me when I'm bitching about the traffic in Vegas. She goes, "Well, you can always be on the 405 in Los Angeles." Oh yeah, right, yeah. You're kind of like, oh yeah, that anywhere else the traffic is exponentially worse. So it's kind of like, it's always good to kind of like have that glass half full all the time.
Totally, man. Dude, I cannot thank you enough. You're a very nice guy, super cool guy. I really appreciate it. A few things. Number one, if you guys come to Tampa, I'm going to take your ass to the gym, because you've mentioned the gym about 8 times here. I'm going to bring you in a gym, see what it looks like, put you through a little routine.
Well, I've been in gyms. I go, we go quite, on a pseudo regular basis. It's always that kind of like, we haven't been to the gym in 2 weeks. Oh, we should go to the gym. And then that kind of thing. So yeah, it is it's funny that you say that, because it's a constant sort of like, I just wish it was something I could become part of my, my regular
your routine. Yeah. See, I was like a fat kid, so I've been doing this so long just because I don't want to be that kid. So it's like,
it's like you say, it's everybody has their, motivations. And I think that, I think that's probably what's missing for me a lot of the time is motivation. It's kind of like, rock and roll, everybody likes skinny rock and roll guys. And then all of a sudden you're like 50 going, where did this come from? Like, what is that?
No, you look great. Hey man, I got to tell you look great. That's everybody. Todd Kerns is like 35 going backwards, man. I don't know what you're on. I need some. Congratulations on, first of all, go to toddkerns.com. It's Todd, TODDKERNS. He's got a bunch of solo records there. He's a fantastic musician, singer, songwriter. His voice is just amazing. Great writer, great player. If you are looking for a guitar, consider his signature guitar, the Anti-Star. Just for the freaking name, consider it.
Right.
Who the hell doesn't want an Anti-Star with Prestige? And congratulations again on that and on the bass. Damnit Wear. Talk about Damnit Wear.
Well, it's funny because people always go, what is Todd Damnit Kerns and Todd Damnit? It was always kind of like a fun, like, Johnny Rotten and Sid Vicious and all those kind of things. And Todd Damnit just rhymed with God damn it. It was kind of like one of those things that just sort of got, it just was being used and stuck. Especially when I moved to Vegas, it became a funny thing of like, it was a really, I almost kind of recommend this because I'd had a whole career in Canada where everybody knew me as this guy who did this stuff. And when I came to Vegas, no one knew what that stuff was. I had a whole career, because there's a whole thing that's going on in Canada right now that we don't know about. You know what I mean?
Sure, of course.
I'm mildly aware of it because I have a connection there. But there's bands in Sweden, there's bands in Japan, there's things going on in these different parts of the world that they have their own shit going on that's really popular for them that we don't know about. And so it was really kind of liberating for me to come to a new area and have to completely prove myself all over again. Like, it's like, they don't give a shit that you might have sold some records in Paraguay. They don't, no one cares, it's like, what can you do right now? And then you sort of develop you have to kind of find this whole thing of are you good enough to really, to start over kind of thing. And that's when my friends started calling me Todd Damnit even more regularly. It just became, but that's just kind of like Toddzilla, Todd, any kind of silly name you come up with. And Vinnie Paul from Pantera and Hell Yeah was a good friend of ours. He didn't even know my name was Todd Kerns. He would just always say,
that is hilarious.
Somebody would say, Todd Kerns, was here or something. And he'd go, who? He would know what he's talking about. So he just always called me Todd Damnit. And then, and in a lot of ways, I think he's probably responsible for it being stuck the most. And then we were doing when I joined Slash's band in 2011, we did a live DVD in Stoke-on-Trent, where Slash was kind of raised. And I think he was born in London technically, but Stoke-on-Trent in England. We shot this DVD in a theater in this town, and my friend of mine had made me this Damnit shirt. It just was like, at your local T-shirt shop, it did D-A-M-I-T in real block letters, and boom, there you go. And I wore it on stage in this DVD, and the DVD goes around the planet, and everybody watches it. And then I start getting these texts or emails going, "I want to buy your Damnit.
Where can I get this shirt?" Oh, wow.
There's only one shirt. I wore it in that thing. It's hanging in my closet now. And then we just started making them on the website, and just sold them. And that would be fucking crazy, because then I'd go to like places like New Zealand or Australia, and I'd walk on stage and I go, there's like, I'd never been there before, and there's people wearing Damnit on their shirts.
That is so cool, man.
Such a bizarre concept. One day we played the Wiltern Theater in LA. And a friend of ours came and he's a photographer. He took all these photos. And he comes back and he's showing us the photos on his iPad. And we're just kind of flicking through the photos, swiping, looking at photos. And Slash goes, "Hey, go back." And I go back and he goes, "Look at all the Damnit shirts in the audience."
That is so cool.
And it was like, wow, it's a really bizarre thing to consider that it's just this silly thing, And then one day, one day, people are wearing them. So, and like I said, I never really am really,
no, chia pets are fucking silly. T-shirts are not silly. Come on, man. Let's face it. It's a T-shirt.
We all wish we would have come up with the chia pet design.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's like one of those things. Like I said, we were lucky enough to have it in stores in LA and stores in New York and in stores in Toronto and it's sort of this thing. It's become its own thing, and I'm very thankful for it. And I don't even know if people really connect that word to me when they see it walking around sometimes, but it's very exciting. And we're always constantly sort of trying to develop it and take it, to even bigger plans and bigger designs and bigger things. But
is it true you're coming out with a Damnit Wear line of lingerie for the Christmas season?
Honestly, if somebody approached us or something like that, that'd be interesting. That'd be fun to design.
So
sure,
check that out, and you can get that on Todd's website, toddkerns.com. He's got a merch store there. Get some Damnit Wear, and definitely wear it to the Slash shows. He's also on social media: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, under Crazy Enough Todd Kerns or Todd Damnit Kerns. And man, that's it. I hope you come by Tampa. I know you're coming to Orlando. And any final words of wisdom? And tell your wife thank you. She's been really patient. Listen to all this.
It's like probably like, can we go do something?
That's what I mean. Thank you.
Not at all. But I don't know. It's honestly, it's funny because I remember in some bio somebody wrote about me. It said something like it was paraphrased from the Jerry Lee Lewis movie, which I always thought was kind of, the Dennis Quaid made a Jerry Lee Lewis movie.
That was a long time ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I remember at the end of the movie, it said something like, because it only goes up to a certain point in Jerry's life, and then it kind of has a whole, like, at the end of it said something like, Jerry is on stage somewhere tonight. You know what I mean? And I remember thinking to myself, well, that's a fucking heavy thing to say. And then it was in one of my bios that somebody wrote something like that. He goes, I'm not sure what Todd Kerns is doing right now, but he's probably on stage somewhere. And I thought, I like that. I like that, even if it's a complete myth.
That's a great closing. It is.
I always kind of want people to assume, and probably assuming correctly, that whatever's going on right now, Todd's probably doing something with music. And that's 100% pretty much true.
That's right. So boys and girls, Todd is on stage somewhere tonight. We'll close with that as a go. Dude, thank you for everything, man. I really appreciate your time. He was a really nice guy to talk to. Thank you, man. I really enjoyed it. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this interview, share it on your social media channels. We really appreciate your support. Thanks very much to Todd Kerns for spending time with us. Please check out Todd on the Road with Slash. Go to toddkerns.com. Again, it's Todd, Kerns. Buy some Damnit Wear, damn it, and then wear it to the shows. Make sure you go to everyonelovesguitar.com. Sign up to get on our newsletter list so you and I can connect. And most important, remember that happiness is a choice, so choose wisely. Be nice, go play your guitar, and have fun. Till next time, peace and love, everybody. I'm out. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.